Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto reincarnation bleach harem. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by ONETIM3 and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1, Dark. Why is it so dark? Alright. I died. Well, I suppose it isn't so bad. It's sort of peaceful actually. Nice and quiet here. But where is here? I can't see anything. Nor feel anything. All I know is that it's sort of comforting like this. To have no worries about anything. I can finally just let go and drift off. It was then that a blinding bright light flashed past the mind of this person. A loud noise echoed throughout their entire being. Eh? Who's disturbing my sleep? What the hell is this light? And why the hell is it so loud? It sounds like a goddamn semi-truck. The light became brighter and brighter, and the sound became louder and louder until finally, that person opened their eyes. However, it was too late. The moment they opened their eyes, an excruciating amount of pain spread throughout their entire being before disappearing just as fast. They only saw the flash of a bright light before seeing the splatter of red blood and then once again black pure darkness. This time, however, it didn't take them long before they were able to open their eyes again, but what they saw simply left them a bit speechless. As they looked down, they noted that they were currently standing above a small dead corpse. A badly mangled dead corpse. The only features that they could make of said corpse was that it had crimson red hair. The rest of the body was completely mutilated. It was then they heard a loud scream followed by more loud screaming, and pretty soon they witnessed a huge crowd gathered together around the dead body. What's going on? Why am I standing over the dead body of a child? It was then they turned to look behind them and saw their own reflection in the glass mirror of the shop nearby. What they saw was a small boy that couldn't be older than 7 or 8 years of age. It was fair-skinned with short bright crimson red hair and golden-colored eyes, standing at a height of about 129 centimeters. What the hell is that me? He waved his arms and walked in a circle several times. However, no matter how he looked at it, his every movement mirrored exactly what he was seeing in the glass window. My hair? It's crimson red, and my clothes. It looks exactly the same as that of the dead body. What happened to my black hair? What happened to my assassin cloak? Why am I in the body of a child? What the hell is happening? He then turned back to look at the crowd that had now completely surrounded the dead body. As he walked over, he waved his hands in front of people's faces, but no matter what he tried, no one paid him any heed. I fancy that no one can see me. I'm in the same clothes as that dead body over there and have the same colored red hair. No doubt about it. I must be dead. He let out a loud sigh and sat down next to his dead body as he watched the police do their job. I'm pretty sure I died once already. After someone killed Grandpa, I spent a year tracking down the killers, which I eventually found. Seems he was killed by a group of highly skilled assassins. Grandpa was an assassin himself. About 25 years ago, before I was even born, he was hired to kill a big mafia boss. Grandpa succeeded, of course, however I guess he was unexpectedly discovered by that mafia boss's kid. That kid was only 5 years old at the time. I guess he couldn't bring himself to kill the kid and let him live. I was born not long after, but I never had any contact with my grandfather. At the time at least. My dad was a wealthy business owner and my mom was a diplomat. One day while coming home from school, I found them both dead. The assassins that were sent to kill them were also dead. The one who killed them was Grandpa. The assassins were hired by a rival company against my dad. This all happened when I was 7. Was I sad? I can't really say. Mom and Dad weren't really ever home anyways, so I guess it felt more like we were roommates. Grandpa took me in after that day and taught me how to be an assassin. I learned various skills from him ranging from weapon handling, poison, torture, interrogation, infiltration, hand-to-hand combat, pain resistance, science, medicine, profiling, etc. Anyways, flash forward 14 years into the future. I'm 21 and Grandpa is dead. I tracked down the 6 killers and killed them along with the person who hired them, but killing others comes with risks. Yeah, I died too. Not like I was a god or anything. Killing that many skilled assassins plus their boss who had a whole bunch of bodyguards. Anyways, now I'm here. The last thing I recall was several tens of bullets to my chest. I'm pretty sure I should have died. So how did I end up here? And in the body of a frickin' child? Do people call this reincarnation? And if I did reincarnate, then this was a pretty shitty reincarnation. I mean, honestly, this body died right after. And what's with the clothes? Don't tell me the kid was an orphan or something. He was hit by a damn semi in the middle of the street and there's a piece of bread on the side of the road. And this store is the one that sells bread. Looks like my guess is spot on. Probably tried to steal a piece of bread, ran off and got hit. As he sat there in silence, drowned in his own thoughts, he suddenly raised his eyebrow curiously. How I can recall the memories this body possessed, and not just the memories from my own original body. Is it because my soul or whatever went into it? According to the memories of this body, its name is Kyoya. Chijetsu Kyoya. But my name is Kishin. Sanada Kishin. Since he was only a 7-year-old boy, there aren't many memories saved up for me to sift through. I have no idea what the hell I'm supposed to do now. Just hang around here as a spirit, I guess. Oh? I guess I could hunt people. That might bring me some entertainment. Kishin was snapped out of his thoughts as he heard a loud roar echo throughout the city. The buildings around the corner trembled and quaked before some large and strange creature with a gaping hole in its chest appeared with a giant white mask on its face. All the people around the block started running and screaming something about terrorists as they dashed as far away as they could. Kishin just widened his eyes in shock. The hell is that? At his loud exclamation, the hollow turned its head and shouted once more in excitement. It began dashing towards him, causing Kishin to quickly turn and run. However, as he attempted to dash off, he was pulled back by the chain in his chest, attached to that of his dead body. Clink. The force of the recoil caused him to fall to the ground and frown in confusion. The hell is this? A chain? Are you serious? I'm being chained down to my dead body. Just as the hollow was about to reach him, several people dressed in a black-colored shihakusho jumped down from the sky and intercepted it. After several minutes of fierce battling, they were able to drive the hollow off. Kishin just remained sitting there on the ground, dumbfounded at what he just witnessed. Oh no, that can't be right. Those black garbs. Those swords on their waists. That monster with a hole in its chest, they look exactly like the characters in those manga and anime that my schoolmates and I used to read and watch. What are they called again? Shinigami? Hollow. It was so long ago. He then looked down to where a chain connected from his chest to his dead body was. This chain. All of this, how can that be? Is this the world of Bleach? There's no way. His thoughts were interrupted once more as one of the Shinigamis walked over to him and said, well, looks like we got here just in time. If we were just a few seconds late, this kid would have been hollow food. Kishin mentally cursed at the Shinigami's words, but ignored it just as fast after he heard that Shinigami mention the word hollow. Now he knew for sure he had somehow arrived in the world of Bleach. That Shinigami stretched his arms before placing the bottom hilt of his Zanpakuto on Kishin's head. Alright kid. I reckon you'd rather not experience something like that again, so I'll just send you off. Sorry about your death. It looked pretty gruesome. Off to the Soul Society for you. Before Kishin could respond, a glowing blue light erupted around his soul and in mere seconds, transformed into a black hull butterfly. It's dark again, so the words of that Shinigami. That confirms it. I reincarnated into the world of Bleach, huh? After taking a moment to let that fact sink in, he began to laugh in his mind, a bit manic sounding. Ha 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 ha. Or maybe this is just how the world is. Ha ha ha. I'm not going crazy, am I? Ha ha ha. He took a deep breath to calm down his emotions before thinking to himself once more. Well, can't do anything about it, so I might as well go with the flow. It was then that Kishin felt he could move his own body again. He slowly opened his eyes and was greeted by the sight of a clear blue sky, however surrounding him was a dark alley. He took in a deep breath before slowly getting off the hard ground. He sent me to an alley. If this really is Bleach, then that Shinigami sent me to Soul Society. But why did I end up in an alley? Just as he was about to walk out of the alleyway, he took note of two individuals walking towards him. They were filthy looking and seemed to be in their mid-40s. One was fat and the other average looking. Oh? A kid. Ha ha ha. You might sell for a good price. Why don't you come with us? We promise we won't hurt you. Little boy. Kishin stared at them with amusement like a predator watching two ignorant vegetarians bark in his face and said condescendingly, oh, 2 lambs for the slaughter, huh? The moment he finished his sentence, the two older men dashed straight for him. However, Kishin immediately looked panicked and pointed behind them as he spoke with fear. What the hell is that? His words instantly caused the two older men to instinctively halt in their tracks and turn to look behind them with curiosity. However, Kishin smirked and dashed right between the legs of the much larger man and kicked him where he was most vulnerable. Immediately that man groaned in horrible pain and slowly fell down to his knees whilst clutching the throbbing jewels between his legs. As he knelt down in pain, he became eye level with Kishin, and the moment they made eye contact he felt fear like never before. Kishin smirked and said with a calm, sinister tone, Arara, what's this? Not so tough now, are you? Can't believe you fell for that. Without waiting for a response, he gouged out both eyes of the man. Blood spurted everywhere as that man screeched in horror and unbearable pain. This happened so fast that the other average-looking man couldn't even react. He was too incredibly shocked. When he finally registered what happened, he felt pure anger and fury. It's just a damn kid. I'll kill this little shit. However, when he returned to reality, he lost sight of the small boy. Kishin smirked as he had already dashed behind the other guy and also kicked him in his most precious spot once more, causing the same thing to happen. As they were eye level, Kishin wasted no time gouging out the eyes of that man as well, causing him to scream in pain and agony. Blood spurted over Kishin's face and body as he darkly smiled watching the two men grovel and roll around on the ground howling in pain. He then walked away with a smug look on his face as he said mockingly, "This is why you two should treat kids nicely. I suppose you can count this as karma. To pick on a 7-year-old kid. Seriously, you two scumbags must be blind. Oh wait. Hahaha. I guess you are now. See ya." Just as he made it outside the alley he was met by several other raggedy-looking men and frowned. "Shit, and it looks like my karma came faster than expected." They must have heard the loud cries of those two shitbags in the alley. It wasn't long before he was dragged back into the alley by the several tens of older men and was beaten black and blue. He groaned and grit his teeth, curling up his body as he covered up his most vulnerable areas in protection. After several minutes of them beating him he had bruises and cuts all over him. Blood seeped down his mouth as he breathed heavily. He was starting to lose consciousness. "Damn, I'm blacking out. The difference in our physical strengths right now is too much. Plus, too many of them for me to break free." Just as he braced himself for another bout of beating he and the group of men heard a loud ominous cry. The cry of a hollow. Kishin sneaked a peek at his assaulters, however he widened his eyes in shock as he witnessed a hollow swoop down from the top of the dark alley and chomped everyone's heads off. He didn't waste any time and immediately attempted to stand up to run, however he gritted his teeth as his right ankle was broken from all the beating he took earlier. He frowned and began to crawl as fast as he could out of the alley, however he stopped dead in his tracks as he witnessed another hollow appear blocking the exit. A moment of silence passed by as he took note of the hollow in front of him and the hollow behind him and laughed self-mockingly. "Ha. Ha 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 ha. So that's how it's going to be, huh?" He then growled darkly with a mix of nervousness and determination on his face. "Fine. Let's do this, you bastards. You want a piece of me? Then you'll have to pay the price." He gritted his teeth and wobbly stood up on his one good leg while leaning against the stone hard wall for support. He panted heavily, still injured from his earlier beating, and placed his fists in front of him. He took deep steady breaths. He focused his mind as his inner assassin came out. His heart rate slowed down incredibly. It felt like time was slowing to a halting crawl. Dying 3 times in 24 hours. What a shitty day. It was then he heard a voice. A faint yet powerful, resonating voice. "Kill them." Kishin frowned as he didn't completely hear what was said, but then he heard it again. "Let me kill them." Kishin was momentarily startled. "Who are you?" That voice, however, completely ignored his question. "Ha ha 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 ha. I'll tear these hollow maggots to pieces. It seems they were drawn here by your Ryatsu. What are?" Before Kishin could complete his thought he was interrupted by that voice inside his head. "Looks like we get to have some fun." Before Kishin could even respond the two hollows dashed right for him. It was then he felt a pounding headache and the only thing he could see was red. A burning sensation welled up inside of him and he felt nothing but the want to murder. To kill. To slaughter. A red-crimson light erupted from his body and passed through the two hollows before a loud resonating blast could be heard. Boom. And then silence. The cry of the two hollows were gone. The only sound left was that of the falling pieces of small rubble that had made up the walls of the alley. Kishin felt as if all the strength had been drained from his body and blacked out. The last thing he saw was the figure of some tall man in a white haori with white hair. 2 days later. Dark, why is it always dark? Feels like deja vu. Ugh, damn headache. Kishin groaned as he stirred in his sleep. He slowly opened his eyes and was greeted by the sight of flowers. He frowned and said aloud to himself. Did I die? He was startled, fully awake by the sound of a voice. Not yet. Kishin quickly sat up in bed and stared at the person by his bedside. White haori. Black shahakusho. Long white hair. Gentle looking face. This is Ukitake Jushiro. If memory serves me right. Jushiro smiled amiably as he curiously watched the small boy in front of him stare right back and observe him. What a curious little child. We were informed of some hollow activity on the outskirts of northern Rukongai in District 70. After the incident that happened not too long ago I decided to go see for myself and did indeed sense 2 hollows, however, when I got to the site there was a burst of powerful crimson-red Ryatsu and the presence of the 2 hollows disappeared right after. I found this child in the spot of the residual energy field. Thankfully Captain Anohana was able to heal his injuries, but how interesting. He can't be more than 7 years old yet he's so calm. He's even taking the time to observe me instead of freaking out. Jushiro was snapped out of his thoughts as he heard Kishin speak. Where am I? Jushiro amiably responded. Don't worry, you're someplace safe. Kishin just inwardly sighed to himself. Oh, he sees me as a 7-year-old kid. Ah well, he's not wrong I guess. But it's a pain to have to act the part. Heh, whatever. I'll just do what I want. Kishin looked around the room once more before asking, okay, where is this room located? Jushiro widened his eyes in shock at the question. He's really taking everything pretty calmly. He's only 7 years old, right? Amazing. But will he understand what I say if I told him? Well, I'll just give it a try. Jushiro cleared his throat before responding, ahem, you're in the 13th Division barracks of Sirte. Vishen widened his eyes a bit surprised and tilted his head up to look at the ceiling as he pondered for a bit. I see. Sirte. Then was I not in Sirte before? Rukongai maybe. Jushiro was once again astonished at the relaxed nature and fluency of the child before him. Incredible. The way he speaks and contemplates his relaxed nature. Wait, does he really understand that Sirte is a place? He's from Rukongai District 70. And the northern district at that where few souls interact with those of us from Sirte. Once again Jushiro cleared his throat. I found you in the 70th northern district of Rukongai. So it was Rukongai, then what about those? Kishin paused for a moment, thinking carefully about what he should say next. Do I say hollow? Should I as a 7-year-old kid even know what a hollow is? Maybe I should play the 7-year-old card a bit. It may be in my best interest to remain here in the Sirte with Jushiro. For the time being at least. What happened to those monsters? Jushiro's expression softened as he recalled the state that he found Kishin in and responded, those things. They're gone. What were they? Jushiro considered Kishin's question for a moment before electing that he might as well tell the kid straight up exactly what they were, since it seemed the young boy was sharper than most. Those creatures were called hollow. Essentially they are souls that have been corrupted. Kishin then pointed his small finger at Jushiro and asked, then who are you? Jushiro let out a sigh of relief as he never thought the boy was ever going to ask him. I'm Jushiro. Ukitake Jushiro. And what's your name? He paused for a moment and recalled the soul that he was now in. I suppose since I'm in this kid's body I should honor him a bit. His name was Chijetsu Kaiwaya. I'll take his surname. Chijetsu. MN. He then pointed to himself and said, I'm Kishin. Chijetsu Kishin. Jushiro nodded happily. Then you can call me Jushiro. Is it alright if I call you Kishin? Kishin nodded before asking, so what happens to me now? Jushiro's expression faltered as he seriously gave it some thought. This child, if he's sent back out to Rukongai, it'll actually end up being more troublesome. I never imagined that he'd have so much Riryoku for such a young age. His small body can't contain all of his Riryoku, so he's unconsciously leaking it out as Riatsu. It's attracting hollows, causing them to cross over. I wonder if he'll be interested in sticking around. Jushiro cleared his throat and carefully asked, ahem, Shin-chan. What would you like to do? I'd like to hear what you think first. Shin-chan. Didn't we just agree that he can call me by my first name? He's already using a nickname. How that was fast. Kishin pondered for a moment before pointing to Jushiro. Then, can I stay with you? I sound so lame. I really said that in my 7-year-old voice. In Kishin's head he seriously thought he sounded lame, however in Jushiro's eyes his heart skipped a beat. This child is precious. Hahaha. Very well, I'll take him in. Jushiro quickly nodded his head and replied with a smile. MN. I was going to ask if you wanted to stay here with me too. I'll work things out from my end so you don't have to worry about anything. From now on you'll be a member of the 13th Division. Kishin was at a bit of a loss for words. Seriously? Just like that? How that was easier than I thought. The next day Kishin was dressed in a black standard Shinigami Shihakusho that had been fitted to his size. He was currently walking throughout the compound while following Rukia around, who was showing him the place. Ichiki Rukia. So she's still here, huh? And she looks pretty young. I reckon she's probably around 10 or 11 in human years, so maybe 100 or 110 in Shinigami years. Interesting, but there doesn't seem to be a lieutenant around. The atmosphere around here seems a bit sad. I wonder if something happened. He was snapped out of his thoughts as Rukia pointed to a building and said, this is the rain-dried hall. Captain Ukitake is in here most of the time to recover his health, so if you need to find him for anything you can come here. Kishin nodded before asking curiously, Rukia-senpai, did something happen? The atmosphere seems a bit gloomy. Rukia inwardly flinched as her expression faltered a bit. She took a deep breath before replying, I suppose you can say that just last week our Lieutenant Shibakain passed away in combat anyways. That's why Captain Ukitake happened to be in Rukongai when you were found. He was still scoping out the area to make sure there wasn't any other strange hollows in the vicinity. Kishin frowned a bit at this revelation. Pain? Did something like that happen? I don't remember too much about the story. I had stopped when the bound arc aired, so I'm not too familiar with all the details on what had happened. Everything I know that happened after the bound arc was just from hearing what other people talked about and occasionally reading and seeing things on the web. Kishin took notice that the subject was bringing down the mood even more, so he quickly changed topics. Rukia-senpai, Captain Ukitake said that I have Riryoku and my Riryoku is leaking out as Riatsu. Can you explain to me what it is and how it works? Rukia was snapped out of her depressed state and stared down at Kishin with a bit of shock. He already knows the terms Riryoku and Riatsu. And he wants me to teach him about it. I don't know if I can do a good job. Kishin noted the conflicted look on Rukia's face, so he grinned and grabbed her hand as he pulled her over to the training ground. He then sat down on the grass in front of her and said teasingly, "Okay, I'm ready, Rukia-sensei." Rukia felt her cheeks tint a bit of pink in embarrassment to Kishin, calling her sensei, but it was because of that her conflicted feelings of doubt about her skills vanished, and instead a certain feeling of pride welled up inside her. She was reminded of the time when she would ask Kane to teach and train her as well, so she smiled warmly and steeled her resolve. "Heh. Very well, since you asked you better be prepared, Kishin. No slacking off, do you hear?" Kishin grinned and nodded. "Oh? Seems my childish acting did the trick. Nice, now I can learn some more about how to control my own power." It was then Rukia began her lecture. Kishin sat and listened in great earnest as he took in all the information. "I see. So there are three main principles of understanding regarding Ryatsu. There is Riryoku, Ryatsu, and then Ryukaku. Riryoku is the amount of spiritual energy inside a person. In essence, it is a measure of one's potential and is used to perform Kido. Ryukaku is the skill of spiritual sense. In other words, seeing with the spirit instead of seeing with the eyes. To better feel and predict where a target will be. And finally, Ryatsu is spiritual pressure. The ability to exert and control one's spiritual energy. The better one can control one's Ryatsu, the stronger their power. At the same time, continuous training and meditation can increase one's Riryoku, raising their potential. As Rukia finished her explanation, Kishin quickly interjected, "Rukia-san, I want to attempt to control my Ryatsu right now." Rukia was a bit taken aback but nodded approvingly. "Alright. It's true that your Ryatsu is always leaking out of your body. It would cause a lot of trouble if you were to ever leave the Sirte without learning how to control it." Kishin nodded and immediately closed his eyes. This is similar to the training that Grandpa put me through when I trained to become an assassin. Although I didn't have Ryatsu as a human, the training principle is similar. Empty the mind of all thought. Focus on 2 points. The center point above the brows and the center point of the abdomen. Imagine a drop of water dripping down into the abdomen, creating a small ripple and then flowing back up to the mind's point. Back and forth, again and again and again. Take slow deep breaths through the nose and just feel. Let go. Let go of all reservations. He didn't know how long he was in his meditation for when he was snapped out of his thoughts from the feeling of someone violently shaking his shoulder. As he opened his eyes with annoyance, he widened his eyes with a bit of shock. The training ground area was in shambles. The nearby buildings had cracks and tears in them, and the passerby division members stood huddled in fear by the corner of the buildings. It was then he heard Rukia let out a deep sigh of relief. "Phew, you finally woke up." Kishin stared in a bit of a daze before a curious expression graced his face. He then pointed innocently to himself and asked, "Oh? Did I do this?" Rukia could only stare in disbelief at Kishin's nonchalant attitude. This kid. Honestly, he's too relaxed. And how is it that he possesses such strong Ryatsu? He's just like that prodigy who joined the 10th division. I believe his name was Hitsugaya Jushiro. Rukia snapped out of her thoughts as she scolded. "Kishin. Be a bit more concerned, will you? If this was anywhere else but the Sirte, you could have killed someone. Understand?" Kishin awkwardly smiled and nodded. "Aha, my bad, Rukia-san. I'll be more careful." Rukia could only sigh and accept his answer. It was then they were interrupted by the voice of Captain Ukitake. "Oh, amazing." Rukia was startled at Ukitake's unannounced arrival and quickly respectfully greeted him. "See, Captain." Ukitake just let out an amiable laugh. "Ahahaha, it's fine, Rukia. No need to be so polite. I didn't mean to startle you. It's just I couldn't help feeling the powerful Ryatsu coming from the training field." He then turned to look at Kishin with careful consideration before nodding his head with an approving smile. As I thought. It was coming from you, Kishin." Kishin had a smug look plastered on his face. "Yeah. I thought I trained to get my Ryatsu under control so it wouldn't keep bothering people." "Ah, you only just woke up yesterday but are already trying so hard. You're growing up so fast." Kishin simply smirked at Jushiro's comment. "Captain, I can't remain a kid forever. How about you help me with my training?" Jushiro thought for a moment before nodding in agreement. You're still so young, but I suppose it would be in everyone's best interest if you got your Ryatsu under control as quickly as possible." "Very well. Then listen carefully. Just do like you did earlier, however the next time you go into deep meditation, don't just let go of all reservations. The key is, once you feel that state of freedom, to then forcefully grasp onto it and control it. Like a rope. An anchor. A weight. Grab onto that feeling and bind it to yourself. That feeling is your Ryatsu. Control it. Weave it. Bind it. Command it. It is yours. If you just let it go and have free reign like you did earlier, you might end up seriously injuring someone. Understand?" Kishin took a moment to contemplate Jushiro's advice before he smiled in understanding. "Oh. I see. Hahaha, so that's what I should do. Jushiro and Rukia could only stare at Kishin dumbfoundedly as they watched him go right back into meditation, as they both thought the same thing at that moment. Did he really understand that? However, they could only be forced to believe it, as in the next moment they witnessed something incredible. A powerful burst of crimson-red Reiatsu erupted from Kishin's body. The crimson-red aura was brighter the further it flashed out, but got darker and darker as it neared the center of Kishin's body. Jushiro and Rukia felt their skin crawl a bit at how ominous the aura felt, however they were shocked that his Reiatsu began to condense and coalesce towards the center of his body until all of it remained within a 5-meter radius of him. Incredible. Simply incredible. I only gave him minimal advice and he was able to understand what I meant. No, better yet, he was able to feel and do exactly what I described. That's even harder. To think that he can already condense his Reiatsu to a mere 3 meters around him when before it was leaking everywhere. Jushiro commented with a flat tone as he was so shocked inside that the tone of his voice didn't even change to match his feelings. Rukia, however, not only had an expression of extreme shock, but she also had a hint of fear. Incredible. His Reiatsu is so powerful, I thought I'd be crushed under its weight. I only get this feeling in the presence of captains releasing their Reiatsu. The amount of Ryoryoku he possesses is tremendous and the density of his Reiatsu is heavy. He's only 7 years old. His potential is limitless. But his Reiatsu felt so ominous. Like a murder. Slaughter. It was frightening. If he didn't control it when he did, I'm afraid the surrounding division members could have ended up going insane. Perhaps even have their minds crushed from the pressure. A Shinigami's Reiatsu somewhat reflects the kind of Zanpakuto spirit within them. Just what kind of Zanpakuto would he manifest in the future? After 5 minutes of successfully suppressing his Reiatsu, Kishin's back became drenched in sweat. He concentrated hard, but pulling his Reiatsu towards his body and keeping it contained felt almost like placing 2 magnets of the same polarity right next to each other and forcing them to stick. Instead of attracting each other, they create a sphere of repulsion. Bam. Kishin was crushed into the ground under the weight of his own Reiatsu as the dense energy he collected around himself rushed out and diffused into the area. Jushiro widened his eyes in alarm and quickly arrived by Kishin's side, but he let out a sigh of relief as he noted that Kishin was fine. Kishin just huffed and panted heavily from mental exhaustion. I think I kind of get it. Jushiro just smiled in relief and nodded. Amen. How about you take a break for a while? Kishin could only nod in agreement. The weeks and months passed by with nothing too major happening. He remained cooped up within the 13th Division barracks on orders of Ukitake as he wanted Kishin to first learn to better control his Reiatsu. Kishin didn't mind as that was his plan from the start. He would wake up at 5 in the morning to stretch for an hour and then jog around the barracks for 2 hours. Afterwards he'd eat and rest for an hour, which by then was around 9 AM. He would then go to the training grounds and practice Zanjutsu with the other division members. At first they were hesitant to teach such a young kid how to wield a sword, but after Kishin managed to convince Jushiro to let him learn by stating that he wanted to be a Shinigami and how learning with the 13th Division would be safer than him trying to learn on his own, the captain could only sigh in agreement and gave in. Zanjutsu training went on for 2 hours, which by then was around 11 AM. To the surprise of the entire division, Kishin was surprisingly adept, but what they didn't know was that he was an assassin in his past life and retained his memories, so he had plenty of experience with weapon wielding. From 11 AM to noon he would shower and eat, which took another hour. Then from noon to 5 PM he would train in controlling his Reiatsu. Afterwards he gave himself 2 hours of free time, which he would spend time playing pranks on the other division members, or he would spend it with Rukia, having her tell him stories about Soul Society. He had her read to him and make her teach him about Kido. Then from 7 PM to 10 PM he'd spend time with Jushiro. The captain would spend his time in peace and quiet with Kishin and simply answered any and all questions Kishin had to the best of his ability. To Jushiro's astonishment, Kishin never ran out of questions to ask, so they would always end up having lots to talk about for the full 3 hours. From 10 PM to midnight, Kishin would bring books from the 13th Division library back to his room and simply read on more information about the world before sleeping and starting the entire process all over again. He currently stood in the middle of his room as he observed himself in the mirror with curiosity. Even though an entire year has passed, I barely grew at all. I don't look any different than I normally do, except for the fact that I'm not skin and bones anymore and I'm not in raggedy clothes. I guess Shinigami really do age slower than humans. Still, even knowing that, it's still a bit weird witnessing it personally. If I was still human, my 7-year-old self would be 8 right now, and there definitely would have been some sort of change. Oh well. I suppose that means there's more time for me to do what I want. As he dressed in the standard Shinigami Shihakusho and walked outside to begin his daily routine, he took note of Jushiro walking out towards the entrance of the division, so he rushed over. Captain. Jushiro turned to see Kishin run over to him and smiled. Shin-chan, how many times have I told you that you can just call me Jushiro? Kishin pondered for a moment before replying smugly, then Shiro-chan. Jushiro let out a defeated sigh. I can't ever win against Kishin. He was snapped out of his thoughts as Kishin asked, where are you going off to so early? I was just going for a walk. Did you want to come? Now that I think about it, ever since you arrived in Sarate you haven't been outside of the 13th Division barracks. Kishin's eyes seemed to sparkle with a hint of mischief and intriguement as he quickly agreed to tag along. As the two of them were walking throughout the Sarate they bumped into several people, all of whom were from different divisions. It was then that Jushiro waved his arms up high and shouted, "OHH Captain Shiba. Shiro-chan." Kishin stared at the direction that Jushiro was waving and inwardly flinched. He stared at the young boy walking next to Captain Shiba with curiosity. Is that Hitsugaya Toshiro? And who's Captain Shiba? The captain before Toshiro? I wonder what happens to him for Hitsugaya to take over as captain. He looks like Ichigo's dad. As both parties closed the distance, Jushiro amiably introduced everyone. Kishin, this is Shiba-isan. He's the captain of the 10th division and the one next to him is Shiro-chan. Toshiro was immediately irked at Jushiro's introduction and quickly interjected, "Oh oi. My name is Toshiro. Hitsugaya Toshiro. Not Shiro-chan." Jushiro just simply smiled and pulled out a few pieces of candy from inside his haori, putting them in Toshiro's hands before also giving some to Kishin. Toshiro pouted and replied bluntly, "I don't need your candy. I'm not a kid." Jushiro just kept smiling and continued where he left off. "Captain Shiba, Shiro-chan, this is Kishin. Chijetsu Kishin. The young boy I mentioned about to you before." "Oh? So this is that kid that you found on the outskirts of northern Rukongai District 70. MNNNHO. Not bad. He's got some presence. Nice Ryatsu. How old is he?" Isan asked. Kishin is I believe he is now 8 years old in human years, but technically 1 year old in Shinigami years. But if he were born as a Shinigami originally he'd be about 70 to 80 years old. And since he arrived in Soul Society he's aging much slower, so I suppose his real age is it's quite complicated. In the end he's 8 in human years, but remains looking like he's 7 years old. Well, for simplicity's sake let's just say that Shin-chan is officially a Shinigami, so we'll just convert his human years all into Shinigami years. Shin-chan would then be 71 years of age. Isan and Toshiro simply stared at Jushiro with a blank expression, completely lost at his long-winded explanation, but in the end after taking time to process all the information they widened their eyes with a bit of shock as Isan remarked, "Yeah, truly. Damn. Not bad. So he's only technically 1 year old in Shinigami years and 7 to 8 in human years, yet he already has a refined control over his Ryatsu. If we go off of that then Toshiro is about 8 to 9 years old in human years and about 80 to 90 years old in Shinigami years. So I guess 81 years old huh? Anyways, what kind of training did you put the kid through Ukitake?" Jushiro awkwardly rubbed the back of his neck. I really didn't do anything." Kishin listened to them talk as he unwrapped a candy, popping it into his mouth. He took note that Toshiro didn't touch his candy, so he smiled mischievously and said, "Oi, kid, if you aren't going to eat your candy, I'll take it off your hands." A thick vein popped off of Toshiro's forehead. Oi, who do you think you're calling a kid? Aren't you a child yourself?" Kishin smirked at his success to rile up Toshiro. "Me? A child? I wonder who's acting more childish right now." Another vein popped on Toshiro's head as he balled up his fist in annoyance. Kishin stared down at Toshiro's fist and let out a sigh while shaking his head. Never mind. You crushed your candy just now. What a waste." Toshiro realized his mistake and involuntarily exclaimed, I know, Kishin sported a smug look as he watched Toshiro's embarrassed reaction. Ha. So you really did want the candy. Then you should have just said so." Toshiro looked at Kishin incredulously as he realized he fell for Kishin's ploy. "Why you, tr." Before he could finish his sentence Kishin threw a few pieces of his own candy at him, forcing Toshiro to widen his eyes in shock and catch the incoming sweets. "There. You can have some of mine. Take it as compensation for providing me with a bit of entertainment." A moment of silence passed in the air as Isan and Toshiro just looked at Kishin with disbelief, while Jushiro had an awkward and apologetic smile on his face. It was then the silence was broken from Isan's loud laugh. Ha. Oi. I like this kid. Ha. He made a thumbs-up gesture to Kishin and praised, "Amen. Not bad kid. Not bad at all. Please be friends with Toshiro. He could use someone like you around him. He's too serious all the time." Toshiro stared at his captain in shock as he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Kishin still had that smug look on his face and nodded. "Alright. Then I'll come visit the 10th division sometimes. You come visit the 13th division sometimes too. Shiro-chan." Kishin remarked and teased towards the end. Jushiro clenched his fist in disbelief and annoyance towards the end, however Kishin simply shook his head and sarcastically reprimanded, "Wow. You really didn't want to eat the candy." Jushiro widened his eyes in extreme shock as he realized he once again crushed the candy in his hands. This time he couldn't hold back his irritation from all the teasing and taunting. "To hell with keeping my composure. I'm gonna strangle this kid to death right now or I won't be satisfied." Jushiro immediately dashed after Kishin, who had already taken off running in the distance while shouting, "Captain Ukitake, thanks for showing me around, but I think I'll head back to the barracks. Bye-bye." Aizen and Jushiro could only stare dumbfoundedly and amusedly at the whole ordeal as they watched Jushiro chase after Kishin off into the distance. Aizen made one last comment. "Huh. Your new recruit is really something. Ukitake." Jushiro simply nodded his head. "Yeah." Chapter 2. Time skip 5 years. Huff. 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 Again I'm still not fast enough. Kishin took in a gulp of air to catch his breath as he started dashing off again. Whish. 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 His body blurred in one spot before appearing in another. "I need more speed. My shunpo still isn't good enough. Faster. Faster. Faster." His body began to blur even faster than before, and the distance he moved became larger and larger with every step he took. Jushiro stood atop a tall building in the division grounds as he watched Kishin train. Man, he's really pushing himself. He always has a relaxed and unconcerned expression or a smug look on his face. It's either one or the other and there is always a hint of mischief in his eyes, however he's quite earnest in what he does. Once he chooses to do something he does it wholeheartedly and with full force. His mischievous nature can cause some people to misunderstand him, but his heart is in the right place. Ever since he was chased after Jushiro that day and learned that he couldn't outrun him because Jushiro could use shunpo, he asked me to train him in this technique as well. I'm astonished with his progress. He wakes up at 5 AM to stretch for an hour before practicing his shunpo for 10 hours. That's all he does. From 6 AM to 4 PM in the evening. He only stops briefly to eat, drink, and recover his Ryoku. Then from 4 PM to 6 PM, he trains his Zanjutsu and Hakuta skills. From 6 PM to 10 PM he trains in Kido. Then he meditates on his soul or reads until midnight before starting the entire process over again. He's been training like this for 5 years straight without stopping. His progress is frightening. I had an agreement with Genryusai Dono. Because Kishin possesses an extraordinary amount of Ryoku and powerful Ryatsu, he let me keep Kishin as a temporary member of the 13th Division under the guise of security supervision. He agreed to let me watch over him for a maximum of 10 years before I would be forced to enroll him into the academy. I wanted to wait the full 10 years before sending him off, however the rate at which he is learning is simply amazing. He is more than ready to enter the academy. He's adapted well to life in Sirte by now. I suppose I don't need to wait the full 10 years before having him enrolled. His control over his own Ryatsu is still a bit shaky, but it is at least at a good enough point where he can even begin to manipulate it into heavy pressure at will. The issue of this problem lies in his body and vast quantity of Ryoku. His body is still too young to handle all of the strain and pressure it places on him, so at best his Ryatsu manipulation is around the 3rd seat level, maybe the lieutenant class level on good days. His circumstance is similar to Hitsugaya's in this way. Either way it's good enough where I feel comfortable sending him to the academy. Even though they would teach him how to control his Ryatsu there as well, I feel better that he learned within the 13th Division grounds. As Kishin completed his shunpo training he moved on to the next thing on his agenda. He did his Zanjutsu training for 2 hours like he normally does before beginning his Kido training. Just as he was about to start practicing he was interrupted by Toshiro's voice. "Surprise attack." Kishin smirked amusedly and immediately shunpoed away just in time. DCH. "Not bad. You've gotten a lot faster, Kishin. You haven't seen anything yet." Kishin replied smugly. Jushiro grinned with intriguement. "Oh? Think you're hot stuff now, huh? Whish." It was then Jushiro widened his eyes in shock as Kishin appeared right behind him and tapped him on the shoulder as he heard Kishin say amusedly, "Tag. You're it." Jushiro immediately swiped his hand behind him only to hit nothing but air. "Why you?" Kishin stared at Jushiro with a smug expression taunting him. "You what? Too fast for Shiro-chan now?" Jushiro stared at Kishin on the roof of a building with careful consideration. "What the? How did he? What kind of insane level of training has he been doing? It's only been 2 years since we last saw each other. In Shinigami years that's not much at all. Ever since I met Kishin 5 years ago we would occasionally meet. As irritating as I find this bastard I don't find him entirely horrible. I knew he was progressing really well, but 2 years ago I was definitely still faster than him. But just now Jushiro was snapped out of his thoughts as he heard Kishin taunt him once more. Maybe it wasn't me that got faster, but you who got slower. Oh. Or maybe it's because of your short height. Your legs can't keep up." A thick vein popped onto Shiro's forehead as he stared at Kishin with determination. "Why, you bastard. I'm older than you. You should learn how to respect your seniors." Kishin laughed and replied nonchalantly, "Sure, when you grow taller than me." Immediately Kishin dashed off into the distance as Jushiro gave chase. Jushiro simply watched this all play out with a bemused expression. Man. Kids should be kids. However, I must say in a mere 5 years Kishin's Shunpo has already caught up to Shiro-chan's. He's even faster than Rukia now. In fact, he's even faster than the 2/3 seats Kiin and Sentaro. But with the way he trains, it does make sense. Most people don't train as hard as Kishin does. It's because they know that they have a long lifespan, therefore they take things at their leisure. However, maybe it's because Kishin was a human not too long ago that he has a sense of urgency and time, and so he chooses to train with all his heart. If we use human time as a standard, then the average Shinigami perhaps practices their Shunpo or some other skill approximately 4 hours a day, averaging about 4 days a week. That's a total of 832 hours a year of practice in one skill. Kishin, however, practices his Shunpo wholeheartedly, going at it for 10 hours a day every day. He puts in a total of 36-40 hours of practice a year. That's a rate of 4.375x the norm of extra practice, which means in one single year of practicing Shunpo, he has effectively trained as if he trained for a little over 4 years in this skill. With the passing of 5 years in total, he has put in the work of nearly 22 years worth of Shunpo practice. And since he's asked me to help give him pointers, as one of the few Shunpo masters in Soul Society, not that I'm bragging, there haven't been any major roadblocks along the way for him. And since he's not technically an official member of the division, he hasn't been assigned any duties, so all of his time is dedicated to training. No wonder Jushiro is astonished. If we use the same sort of logic in his other areas of training, then in 5 years he's practiced Kido, as if it were nearly 9 years, and in Zanjutsu and Hakuta nearly 4.5 years. He spends less time training in his Zanjutsu and Hakuta skills, however he must be a naturally born talent in Hakuta and Zanjutsu. He was already very skillful in swordplay and hand-to-hand combat from the get-go. He trains just enough to ensure that his skill in these areas isn't dull. On the rare days that he leaves the 13th division to stroll around Sirte, people see him as a genius talent where everything seems easy for him, however they aren't aware of all the hardworking hours he puts into his training and studies every single second of the day. After several hours of dashing around, both Jushiro and Kishin stood in the middle of the 13th division training grounds huffing and puffing. "You've gotten huff faster," Jushiro remarked out of breath. "And you haven't been slacking huff off," Kishin replied just as out of breath. After their game of tag, Jushiro stuck around for a bit, exchanging greetings and whatnot with Jushiro and Rukia before returning to the 10th division. As their game took longer than anticipated, Kishin decided to hold off the rest of his training today and sat relaxedly atop the roof of a building in the division grounds. Jushiro arrived and sat next to him as they both watched the sun disappear beyond the horizon, letting the darkness of the night cover the sky. After a few minutes of silence between them, Kishin commented, "Man. I think I'm pretty fast now." Jushiro simply let out an amused laugh. "Ha. So you beat Shiro-chan, huh?" Kishin nodded with pride. "Yeah, of course I did." "So, are you still continuing with this sort of training?" Kishin thought for a moment before answering. "Yes and no. I'm changing it up. I think the level of my Shunpo is at a decently high level right now. I'll keep my training regiment, but I'm switching things up. I'll keep the morning schedule the same, however I'm no longer running for 10 hours straight. Instead I'll run from 6 AM to 10 AM for 4 hours. Then I'll practice Zanjutsu and Hakuta for 2 hours. My skills in those areas are pretty solid, so I don't think I need to change anything there. I want to really work on my Kido and Reiatsu control. I'll train from noon to 8 PM in Kido. Then from 8 PM to midnight I'll meditate and focus on my soul and control of Reiatsu. Maybe read a few books here and there." Jushiro could only sigh in astonishment at how well Kishin adjusted his training regiment. "Once again you don't cease to amaze me, Shin-chan. You didn't even need my advice. You recognize that your skill in Shunpo is now at a high enough level where you don't need to go full force in training it, but you also ensure that you aren't shirking it from your schedule. I agree with your assessment on Zanjutsu and Hakuta. You must have a knack for fighting. You picked up on weapon handling and hand-to-hand combat so quickly that you're right about not needing to spend so much time in this area for now. And now you're trying to go full force into Kido training and refining your Reiatsu control and meditation. Speaking of which, I've been curious, have you been able to hear the voice of your Zanpakuto again ever since that day in Rukongai?" Kishin took a deep breath as he looked at the night sky and shook his head. "I haven't. This is why I want to spend more time trying to meditate on my soul and controlling the flow of my Reiatsu." Jushiro nodded in understanding. "Actually, Kishin, I was thinking that you should enroll in the academy. You've been here for about 5 years now and you've made incredible progress. The truth is I had made an arrangement with the Captain Commander Yamamoto. He recognizes that you have great potential. The amount of Ryoryoku you possess is immense. If you learn to channel it properly you have the potential to become a captain-class Shinigami one day. The agreement between the commander and I was that he'd let you remain in the 13th division for a maximum of 10 years, under the guise of me being a security supervisor for you, due to your immense Ryoryoku and Reiatsu. After that you would have to enter the academy like all Shinigami here and then apply to join the Gate 13 through proper channels after graduation. On average class lessons in the academy last for 6 years, however in truth graduation depends on the individual. As you know our Lieutenant Kane passed away, however he graduated from the academy in just 2 years. Captain Ichimaru of Division 3 graduated in 1 year. And Toshiro also graduated in just 1 year. I personally believe that you can achieve the same feat as Toshiro and Captain Ichimaru graduating in a single year, however just know that you don't have to rush. Even if you can graduate in a year if you wish to remain longer you certainly can. So, what do you think? Interested in attending? Of course if you want we can also wait out until the 10 years are up. Ishin stared at the night sky lost in his own thoughts for a moment. The academy huh? Over the past 5 years I've gotten a basic handle on my Reiatsu. I just now confirmed against Jushiro that I'm not lacking in my Shunpo. I have built up a pretty good foundational knowledge of Kido over the years, with help from Rukia and Captain Ukitake. The Hakuda fighting style here is very similar to my assassination hand-to-hand combat style I learned from Grandpa. Main difference is the incorporation of Reiatsu and Shunpo in certain movements. This I have a pretty good handle on. Zanjutsu is about the same as well. My weapons training with Grandpa was more than sufficient to help me sharpen up my skills in swordplay here. And I've finished reading all the books in the 13th division. The division owned about 1600 total personal books in its private collection. I spent nearly 2 hours every night reading for 5 years. Thanks to my training as an assassin I can average reading about 500 words a minute and retain most of the information I read. In essence if I really tried I could probably read about 3000 total books in 5 years, that average 100,000 words a book if I dedicate 2 hours every day to reading. I could read even more if I dedicate more time to pure reading. Thanks to those books I basically have an understanding of the workings of Soul Society and some of its history. It also helped me expand my foundational knowledge in all my other combat forms as well, so I suppose attending the academy wouldn't be a problem. I suppose I could wait another 5 years, but I might as well get it out of the way. Graduate. And join the Gate 13. I'd officially get paid then as well. Jushiro took note of how long it was taking for Kishin to reply, so he felt a bit awkward and guilty that he hadn't told Kishin any of this before until now. Perhaps I should have mentioned something to him at the very beginning right after Genryus I don't know and I had come to this agreement is Kishin perhaps upset. Or perhaps he doesn't want to attend the academy yet. However Jushiro breathed out a sigh of relief as he heard Kishin's answer. Alright Captain Ukitake. Attending the academy sooner than later will be better. I'd rather get it out of the way. Plus I'll get paid if I officially join the Gate 13 right. And I can start going on missions and do other things. Jushiro nodded happily, however he also felt an odd sense of curiosity at how easily Kishin was taking the situation. Well I suppose it is Kishin after all. There haven't been many things that have happened to make him flustered. But I have a feeling that many students might just misunderstand him. Kishin does have after all a unique personality. The next day Kishin continued his routine by waking up at 5 AM and stretching for an hour before training his Shunpo for 4 hours. Jushiro had informed him that the academy wouldn't begin their semester until the beginning of next week and so he had a week to prepare and do whatever he liked until that time. After his Shunpo training he normally started training his Zanjutsu and Hakuda skill, however, as he was more than adequately well versed in this area, he decided to head to the Sirite Public Library as he needed more books to read since finishing the entire private book collection within the division. Just as he was about to head out the door he stopped in his tracks when he heard his name being called. Oh? Rukia-senpai. What's wrong? He asked nonchalantly. I heard you were going to the library. Kishin simply nodded. Then let me come with you. I want to get some books too. Kishin shrugged his shoulders. Okay. Two's a company. As they both walked in peace and quiet next to each other, Rukia asked with curiosity, is it true that you beat Toshiro yesterday in a game of tag? Yeah. I did. Kishin replied matter-of-factly. Rukia was shocked. Really? Your Shunpo is that good already? I hear the speed of Toshiro's Shunpo is near a captain's level. Kishin nodded before smiling mischievously. Senpai, don't tell me you want to play tag too. Me? And no. Ahem no thanks. I'm alright. Kishin's mischievous expression turned back to his bored and relaxed face as he replied a bit disappointedly. Oh. That's too bad. Rukia was a bit baffled at Kishin's reply. Wait did he want me to say yes? Well, it's not like I would mind. Just as they were about to enter the library, they paused in their step to avoid being hit by the opening of the door. As a person walked out from the library entrance, they paused and took note of Kishin and Rukia. Oh. My apologies. I didn't mean to block the entrance. Rukia quickly composed herself and replied politely, no. It's alright, Captain Aizen. We should be the ones who are more careful next time. Aizen simply smiled and shook his head. Ah, there's no need for you to be so formal in front of me. You're Kichiki Rukia, correct? The younger sister of Kichiki Byakuya. And this young man is you must be Chijetsu Kishin, right? Kishin simply replied lazily, yeah. That's me. Rukia pinched Kishin's side, causing him to slightly flinch. Ow. Kishin, where's your manners? This is Captain Aizen. Kishin just let out a sigh before he sarcastically said in a joyous tone, ahem. Yeah. That's me. This only caused Rukia to pinch his side harder. Ow. Aizen simply laughed as he watched their antics and exchanged a few more pleasantries with them before excusing himself. As Aizen walked off, he took a secret glance behind him at the two young Shinigami's retreating form with great interest. Oh, so that is Jujetsu Kishin. An interesting little fellow. He's a bit difficult to read. Was he intentionally avoiding direct confrontation with me? Or was that just how his personality is? And Kichiki Rukia. I see that you are growing up well. As Aizen walked off lost in his thoughts, Kishin was lost in his own thoughts. TCH. That bastard. He was sizing me up just now. I shouldn't get involved with anything about him yet. I'm not currently strong enough to protect myself from him. If I remember correctly, he's supposed to be insanely strong, and the power of his Zanpakuto is supposedly complete hypnosis. He was supposed to have already placed most if not all those who hold any kind of authority in the Sirte under his power. It won't matter if I try to drop hints to others that Aizen's a traitor. It's unlikely anyone will be able to do anything about it. They're more likely to end up dying in his hands if they become a nuisance. And I wonder how many people would believe me. And on the off chance that Aizen finds out I'm the one who's been dropping hints of his movements, he might decide to quickly kill me. What's the best way to go about this? I'll have to think about this more in depth later. Kishin was snapped out of his thoughts as Rukia noticed how lost in thought he was, so she took a book off the shelf and lightly tapped it on his forehead. Ow. Kishin replied apathetically. Rukia frowned at his response and reprimanded, Oi. Have a little more self-awareness. Kishin smirked and replied amusedly, yes ma'am. This irked Rukia more, so she once again tapped the book against his head, but this time a bit harder. Ow. That one hurt. Really? I couldn't tell. Your apathetic expression didn't convey your feelings. Perhaps I ought to hit harder just to make sure. Kishin quickly saluted and said, Captain Aizen, you're back. Immediately Rukia panicked a little and turned around only to see no one. Kishin smiled mischievously and snagged the book from her hands, causing her to yelp in surprise. As she turned back around, Kishin simply snickered at her mix of frustration and embarrassed facial expression. For some odd reason that trick works every time. Rukia could only let out a sigh. You're too much to handle. Kishin just smiled and put the book away as he and Rukia continued walking towards the higher floors of the library. You may say the Kichiki-senpai, but I know it's not how you really feel. At least with me you can always be yourself. Rukia inwardly flinched at his statement. What do you mean? What else could I mean? You don't have to pretend to be so serious and strict about following the rules all the time. It's fine to just relax, you know. I don't mind. Rukia responded a bit flustered. Why I'm not so serious all the time. Right. You are. When you're with others. Even when you're with Captain Ukitake. Also, senpai, you like to bottle up your frustrations, worries, and anxieties inside. You don't like to let people see that side of you because you think it makes you look weak. You think it makes you seem useless, but in truth if you don't tell anyone about them, then how can you learn to overcome them? And the people who care about you, how would they ever know about what you feel if you shut them out? He replied straightforwardly. Rukia fidgeted in her spot with a depressed look, lost in her thoughts. He's right, but what can I do? I can't shame the Kichiki clan name, but my skills are only average. I'm not even a ranked officer in the 13th division. The power of my Kido is average at best in the division. My Zanjutsu skills are subpar. And Kishin and Toshiro, who are younger than me, can even perform Shunpo at almost the captain level already. Kishin hasn't even been a Shinigami for more than 5 years, and his Shunpo has far surpassed me. In fact, his Shunpo has far surpassed anyone in our division except for Captain Ukitake. I'm a failure compared to him. Why did Big Brother even bother adopting me? I'll only drag him down. I couldn't even save Kei Dono. Kishin frowned as he noticed that the atmosphere surrounding Rukia became gloomier and gloomier, so he took a book off the shelf and smacked her on the head. Bop. Ow. Rukia exclaimed, immediately snapping out of her thoughts. The gloomy atmosphere around her instantly disappeared as she gripped the top of her head, with both hands massaging the area she was hit. What did you do that for? Vishen gave her an innocent look and shrugged his shoulders. Rukia-senpai, can I tell you a secret? Rukia was inwardly startled as Kishin's reply to her was completely out of left field. She could only nod her head extremely curiously. As Rukia bent her head down so he could whisper in her ear, he immediately bonked her on the head again with the book in his hand. Bop. OWWW. Rukia exclaimed even louder. Many people in the library frowned and shushed them, causing Rukia's face to heat up in embarrassment. Why you, what did you do that for? Would you hit me? Rukia whispered loudly. Vishen simply smirked and put the book away. Do you feel better now? Rukia could only look at him completely confused. What are you talking about? Vishen frowned at her answer. Your facial expression earlier. The mood around you. It was depressing, so I hit you. I know what you were thinking. You were probably comparing your skills to other people in the division. Being self-depreciating of yourself. Thinking yourself inadequate for the Kichiki clan name. And on top of it all, you were probably thinking that Kane-senpai's death was your fault. Rukia felt her heart skip a beat at the mention of Kane's name. A sorrowful expression painted itself on her as she recalled that event, however she was quickly snapped out of it when she heard Kishin warn, if you want more souvenirs on that noggin of yours, then keep up that depressing look. Ahahaha, sorry. I just can't help it. Kishin grabbed a few books and set them down on a table as Rukia followed him and took the seat beside him. Rukia-senpai. Kane's death isn't your fault. I heard the entire story from Captain Ukitake about the late lieutenant. Before she could respond, Kishin interjected. Did Kane-senpai want you to fight beside him? Rukia struggled to answer this. Kishin noted her silence, so he continued. Did you know that Captain Ukitake has two philosophies on fighting? Rukia flinched at the question as she recalled the memory when Kane told her this. She folded her hands together and replied softly, Captain believes that there are two types of battles. Those who fight must be able to distinguish between them. The one where we fight to protect life and the one where we fight to protect one's pride. Vishen nodded. Right. Then again, if you think about it a little more, couldn't one make the claim that their pride is their life? Then should they lose their pride, they would be left with nothing. So in the end, I think Captain's philosophy can be reworded or reinterpreted. Instead, it'd be more accurate to say that one should fight to protect what's in their heart. Whether that be human life, friends, comrades, pride, dignity, anything. Whatever is in their heart, that's what they fight to protect. Captain told me how Kane-senpai fought a strange and powerful hollow. How that hollow possessed his body. And then how Kane-senpai fought to regain control of his body and chose to die on your sword. Rukia-senpai. What kind of memory do you think Kane Dono wanted you to have of him? I don't think it's one where you blame yourself for his death. I think he wanted you to carry on his will. His heart. And to remember him fondly. The hearts of people we carry on inside of us gives us strength. Don't you think? Rukia-senpai. Vishen smiled a bit dejectedly and derisively at himself after he finished his little speech to Rukia. I wonder if she'll believe what I said. I may tell her all of this, but in truth I've never personally experienced these things myself. In my old life I killed people for a living. In order to do so I killed myself as a human. Detached my emotions and soul. All these complex emotional concepts and ideals I gained with a heavy price from the death of the ones I killed. Some would have family or relatives or someone close to them that would wish to take revenge on me. They would preach to me about their own philosophy and tell me why they hunted me down. They would tell me the reason they wanted revenge. The reason they fight. The reason they tried so hard, no matter how futile and no matter how high a wall they would be forced to climb. In the end, all those who came after my life died in my very hands. Over time I began to understand people. Every person who tried to kill me for revenge would first pour out their heart and soul to me. Wanting me to understand their hatred. Wanting me to understand their drive. Their motivation. Their feelings. And then they died. In my hands. In failure at taking my life. And it was as if every one of those people whose lives I took imprinted onto my empty soul a piece of what it was to be human again. Friends. Family. Comrades. I never before considered any of that. I only ever had two things. My skills. And Grandpa. But after reincarnating, maybe it's because I ended up in someone else's body, or maybe it's because I'm finally free from my chained life as an assassin. I'm starting to feel less empty. I suppose the correct way to put it is I feel more free. To just be me. Not having to kill or restrain anything about myself. Upon hearing Kishin's spiel, Rukia immediately recalled the memory of when Kane had told her the exact same thing. She then unconsciously whispered aloud as she recalled the words of the late lieutenant. When we come into contact with each other, a heart is created between us. Vishen turned to look at Rukia curiously. But Rukia was entranced in her own thoughts as she continued. The heart is created when we think about something or someone. Because if I was the only person left in the world, then I wouldn't have a heart anymore. And if your heart is here, then that is your reason to be here. And that is enough. Ishin widened his eyes a bit, surprised at how deep Rukia's philosophy was, and thought about what he heard her say for a moment before nodding in agreement. Yeah. That sounds about right. Rukia. It was then tears began falling down from Rukia's eyes, causing Kishin to feel completely lost. What's going on? Crap. Did I make her cry? I'm not good at stuff like this. He awkwardly rubbed the back of his neck, a bit flustered. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you cry. Rukia smiled at Kishin's apology and wiped her tears away as she shook her head. No. It wasn't you. Rather, thank you. Kishin. Now he was very confused, so he could only reply completely lost. Oh, you're welcome. Rukia just let out a joyful laugh, while some remnant tears still streamed down her face. After several seconds passed by, she managed to rein in her emotions. Sorry. Thanks to you, I remembered the words Kei Dono told me that day. Amen. When one comes into contact with another, a heart is created. We must never die alone. Because then our hearts will live on within our comrades. Right. Kei Dono. She softly clutched the spot where her heart was on her chest as a reminiscent smile graced her lips. Kishin could only remain seated next to her in an uncomfortable, awkward silence, not knowing what to say. 1 week later, Kishin yawned as he walked off to the academy, however he was stopped right out front of the academy entrance by one of the Shinigami recruiters. Wait. Where's your class emblem? Kishin raised his eyebrow in confusion. Class emblem? What's that? That Shinigami just let out a sigh. Hey, another newbie who doesn't know the rules. Look. If you were late for the official registration testing, then you need to get your Reiatsu tested. Afterwards you need to take a generalized aptitude test to see what basic knowledge skills you have. After that you'll be placed in a class. Luckily for you today, classes are beginning with a 2-hour delay just for people like you who didn't take the tests beforehand, in order to give you all a chance to get situated in a class suited to your learning needs. He then pointed to where several long lines were formed and said, you need to wait in one of these lines. Perform the 2 tests and then get your class badge as well as dormitory number and key. After that you can head to your respective classroom for the start of lessons. Oh? So that's how it is. I see. Thanks for the info. Kishin said nonchalantly as he walked off to stand in line, leaving that Shinigami recruiter completely speechless and baffled at his unconcerned attitude. As Kishin patiently waited in line, he watched as the Shinigami in front of the booth play some sort of device that looked almost like a Geiger counter in front of each person waiting in line. It must be some sort of Reiatsu or Ryuryoku detector. Probably determines the current standing of a Shinigami before placing them in a class. Makes sense. It wasn't long before he was up next. As Kishin stood before the booth, the Shinigami behind the counter was about to do the same thing as he did with the others, however that Shinigami slightly flinched and stared with a bit of shock at him as he heard that Shinigami comment, "Oh, you sure got some presents, kid." Kishin nodded indifferently. "Why, thank you." He took note of a thick vein that popped on the forehead of that Shinigami. What's with your tone, kid? Watch how you speak to your superiors." Kishin inwardly sneered at the Shinigami, but quickly lost interest and just remained silent as he waited for the test to be over. That Shinigami felt a bit ticked off at the fact that Kishin didn't even respond, so he just clicked his tongue in annoyance and placed the measuring device in front of Kishin, however once more he widened his eyes in shock. He moved the device away and then moved it back. He did this several times, but no matter how many times he did it, he kept getting an error sign. In the end he called over another Shinigami and asked, "Yo, you know what's going on with this thing? It can't measure his Ryuryoku." The second Shinigami furrowed his brow in deep contemplation and pulled out his measuring device, however the same thing happened. He then took a moment to study Kishin's frame for a good minute before a bead of sweat dripped down the side of his head. He quickly recomposed himself and wrote on a sheet of paper before commenting, "You sure got a presents, kid. Here, take this paper to your written exam and take this room key. Go on ahead and finish your registration." Kishin nodded in appreciation before taking his leave. The first Shinigami raised his eyebrow questioningly and asked, "Oi, was that alright? To automatically place him in the top 100? We couldn't even measure his Ryuryoku." The second Shinigami simply shook his head in a bit of nervousness. "Idiot. Of course it can't measure his Ryuryoku. It's because his Ryuryoku is a lot denser and more abundant than the rest of these guys out here. The quality of the Ryuryoku meter we brought with us can't read that high. There's no need to worry about his placement. He's definitely exceptional. Couldn't you feel it? Even without the Ryuryoku meter, I knew right away that he had an immense amount. If you focused on him for just a few seconds you'd be able to feel it, the heaviness of his Ryuryoku leaking as Reiatsu being emitted off his body. People like them are rare. Even in the Sirite. Don't underestimate them. I've been doing this job for a long while." Captain Ichimaru and the 10th Division's 3rd Seat Hitsugaya Toshiro went through this process as well, getting their Ryuryoku measured, and it wasn't able to read them. Now look at where they are. It's not just them. There are others that went through this test and had the same result. Every single one of them became noteworthy people in Soul Society. You shouldn't try to make enemies out of people like that. The first Shinigami felt his back drench in cold sweat as he recalled how he acted towards Kishin. Meanwhile, Kishin couldn't care less about those two Shinigami, as he was currently sitting in a room taking the paper exam in front of him that tested one's general knowledge about the workings of Soul Society, Zanjutsu, Hakuta, Kido, Ho-Ho, the Gate 13, the human world, Ryatsu, and whatnot. Test is pretty general. Nothing very difficult on here. 30 questions that cover the surface layer knowledge at best. I suppose it makes sense. It can't be too difficult since the academy also recruits individuals from outside of Sarate and Rukongai. People living on the outskirts wouldn't have too much knowledge about Kido or Ryatsu yet. With all the books I've already read and with Captain Ukitake as a prime source of knowledge, I think I've been properly equipped for paper exams. As Kishin finished up in less than 10 minutes and turned in his test, he caught the attention of everyone around him. Some students stared with disbelief, some had a smug look thinking that he had given up, and others stared with indifference, wondering how everything would turn out. As the proctor of the exam looked over the test, they widened their eyes in shock. They double-checked, triple-checked, quadruple-checked, however, no matter how many times they looked over Kishin's test, they couldn't find any mistake. Why, you really finished the test in 10 minutes? Kishin shrugged his shoulders with lax and nodded. MN. Is there something wrong? Well no, I was just surprised. That's all. Ahem. It says here that your name is Shigetsu Kishin, correct? And your Ryoku test has you ranked in the top 100. Very well, your placement will be class 1. At hearing the proctor's words, everyone in the room widened their eyes in shock at the realization that Kishin didn't give up, nor was he trying to stir up some trouble. It was really because he finished his exam in 10 minutes. And the revelation that he had been placed in the top 100 of the Ryoku measuring test made them even more shocked. After Kishin took the class 1 emblem and academy uniform, he left the room, leaving the proctor a bit dazed in amazement. So another genius enters the academy. It wasn't long ago when the genius Jushiro of the 10th division attended. Kishin changed into the academy uniform, which looked similar to the standard Shihakusho, only the hakama was blue and the shirt was white with the emblem of the academy on it. As time winded down, he quickly arrived in front of a large spacious room that had a large screen door leading to a training ground right outside. So this is the classroom for those in class 1. Looks nice. Apparently class 1 is an accelerated program. He was interrupted out of his thoughts when he heard a deep and gruff voice behind him. Move it, kid. Kishin raised his eyebrow in curiosity and turned to look at who was being so rude right off the bat. It was a large burly man who stood at about 195 centimeters in height with tanned skin and short black hair. He was a bit overly muscular and seemed to have a natural menacing look on his face. Kishin took note of 2 others beside him and 1 other in the middle. Seems that guy in the middle is the boss. The other 3 must be his lackeys. Seeing as Kishin didn't move nor did he respond, the large burly man grunted disapprovingly. Kid. I told you to move it. Better do so while I'm still asking nicely. Kishin plastered an innocent look on his face as he asked, who are you? Are you daft, kid? My name is Oda. These 2 beside me are Ida and Haru. He then stepped to the side for a moment, revealing the person behind him, and said with great respect, and this is the young master Takaki. Kasumioji Takaki. After hearing Oda's introductions, Kishin finally had an idea of the situation. Oh. So Takaki is of the Kasumioji clan. One of the high-ranking noble families in Soul Society, surpassed only by the 4 great noble houses like the Kichiki clan. So these 3 idiots, Oda, Ida, and Haru, must be Takaki's dogs. Once again, Oda, noticing Kishin's lack of cooperation, clenched his fist in annoyance. Now that you know, move it or I'll remove you by force. Kishin continued playing the innocent card and replied tauntingly, oh. Sorry, I didn't know who you were. Gorilla man, right? Oda was immediately incensed as thick veins popped on his forehead in anger. You bastard. He then struck out with his large fist. The difference in height was incredibly noticeable. Oda was 195 centimeters tall, whilst Kishin was still only 129 centimeters in height. However, despite the difference in size and expectant difference in strength, Kishin merely held up his left hand and caught Oda's giant fist. Bam. A sound made from the contact resonated through the hallway, and a little bit of wind was generated from the force of the blow. A moment of silence passed by. Then another and another until the one who broke it was Oda himself, as he asked in complete and utter shock. How impossible. Why, you were able to stop my fist. Kishin smirked amusedly and gently removed his palm from Oda's fist. Arara, all those muscles must be for show. No power at all. Oda felt pure burning anger, hatred, and rage fill him up inside at Kishin's taunt, however he couldn't understand what happened. He was unsure of what he should do next, but then he heard Takaki's voice. Oda. What the hell do you think you're doing? Get rid of this brat. I'd like to go in and have a seat now. Ida, Haru, you too. The three of them frowned and nodded obediently. Yes. As you wish, young master. By now the hallway was crowded with other students as they watched with curiosity at what was happening. Oda, Ida, and Haru flanked Kishin on all sides, and just as they made a move, they let out a heavy breath and groan before falling to the ground unconscious. Takaki stared in disbelief. What? Kishin smirked and walked right on top of Oda's unconscious body, making his way over right next to Takaki. So, young master Takaki. Did you want to go in first? Takaki gulped in nervousness as a bead of sweat dripped down the side of his forehead. It's fine. I needed to use the bathroom anyways. Without wanting to stay there any longer he dashed off into the distance pushing past the crowd in the hallway. Kishin shrugged his shoulders and walked into the classroom taking a seat. HMPF. Serves them right. There's 2 doors. They could have just used the other one. Didn't have to be so rude. As the incident came to an end and the crowd began to disperse, there was one individual who was watching everything play out in the dark corner of the hallway. Aizen. He grinned in amusement and fixed the glasses on his head. Very interesting. He's quite a character. I see that Ukitake didn't shirk training him during his time under the 13th Division's supervision. To overcome the difference in physical strength he exerted just enough Reiatsu to nullify the attack. His Reiatsu control, while shaky, is still quite refined compared to most. Especially for his age. And his speed in Shunpo is fast enough where they couldn't follow his movements with their eyes. He was also able to incapacitate his assaulters with minimal effort by targeting their weak points. In this regard he's quite accomplished in both Ho-Oh and Hakuta. Another genius enters the academy much like Jin and Toshiro. Perhaps I should find a time to show him my Kyoka Sujetsu just in case he becomes someone notable in the future. The ring of the bell brought Aizen out of his thoughts as he walked off to teach his calligraphy class. As Kishin sat on his desk minding his own business, he was interrupted out of his thoughts by someone sitting down next to him. Yo. That was some pretty crazy stuff you did back there. How'd you do that? Kishin glanced at this new person with curiosity. They had long white hair that was tied up behind them, and they had purple eyes. His skin was a light tan color, and his body was slim yet well defined. He was about 175 centimeters tall and seemed to be somewhere in his teens. Kishin surmised he was probably somewhere between 15 to 16 in human years or 150 to 160 in Shinigami years. And you are? Oh right, sorry I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Kinji. Tsuneshiro Kinji. Kishin tilted his head a bit intrigued. That's Tsuneshiro? Another noble family. This family possesses quite some influence in Soul Society. Their main responsibility is to document the history of the Soul Society. I've read some of their books before to get a better understanding of the world. I never imagined I'd meet someone from the Tsuneshiro family here in the academy. Kishin shook his hands in greeting as he replied, I'm Kishin. Chujetsu Kishin. Nice to meet you Kinji. As for how I dealt with those idiots earlier, I simply released a bit of Reiatsu and outmaneuvered them with Shunpo. Kinji widened his eyes in shock. Why, you can already control your Reiatsu to that level. And you can use Shunpo. Why, you must be incredibly fast then, even I couldn't catch what happened. From your words it means that you've learned how to use Shunpo too, huh? Kinji nodded. I'm not bragging or anything, but since I come from a noble family I was taught the basics. They were interrupted from their conversation as the teacher finally entered the classroom and introduced himself. Good afternoon everyone. I am your instructor for the accelerated course class 1, Onabara. Jingoro Onabara. You may address me as Jingoro-sensei or Jingoro Dono. Since it's an accelerated course we have no time to waste. I'll get over with the introductions quickly and we're going to begin right away. We're going to spend 1 month having all of you practice to control your Reiatsu while building up your knowledge of what Shinigami actually are. What your duties would be. Things like that. Then we're going to go straight into training the 4 major combat forms. Ho-Oh, Hakuta, Zanjutsu, and Kido. Before you leave class today make sure you each take one of these blank Asauchi with you. You'll also be tasked with infusing your Reiatsu into your Asauchi and hopefully be able to one day awaken your very own Zanpakuto. Understood? Yes. Everyone responded. Chapter 3. 3 months later, Kishin stood in the training field as Kinji stood opposite him. Both of them with their swords drawn. Everyone was currently practicing their Zanjutsu skills with a sparring partner, and Kishin's partner was Kinji. Over the past couple months they had gotten to know each other pretty well, being desk mates and all. On top of that they also shared a dorm room together alongside one other person, however their third roommate named Raiga wasn't placed in class 1 like them. He was instead placed in class 2. As Kinji attacked Kishin, slashing left and right, up and down in a series of ferocious strikes, Kishin lazily gripped his sword and with minimal effort he blocked, parried, and deflected each attack. Ting. Cling. Clang. Clink. The training was too easy for him. Kinji wasn't truly skillful in Zanjutsu, rather he was more skillful in Kido. The only reason he sparred with Kinji at all is because Kinji asked and they were on good terms. In truth it wouldn't have mattered to him who he sparred with. The skill level of everyone's Zanjutsu in the class was subpar at best, even if this was class 1. Not to mention he had skilled members in the 13th division to train against every single day for the past 5 years, therefore he found his classmates quite lacking. Kishin continued to parry and block as he split his mind's focus in two. Defending and thinking to himself. The academy is sort of boring. For the first month everyone only practiced controlling their Ryatsu. This is obviously important and I can obviously still use some more practice controlling all of my Ryatsu, however the level of my control over my Ryatsu was already at the 3rd seed officer level when I first entered. After a month of strictly training just Ryatsu control I'm pretty sure I've raised it to at least the lieutenant level. Then we learnt about the duties of what Shinigami do and history and whatnot of Soul Society, which I learned all about already after reading the complete collection of books in the 13th division. Once the second month came around we began learning and practicing Kido, Ho-Ho, Hakuta and Zanjutsu, all of which, while in the accelerated program, was still too slow for me. I ended up just doing my own things. It's at least nice that Captain Ukitake sends me new books to study regarding these subjects, so I have something to do other than listen to the boring lectures. Third month seems to be much of the same. Well, I hear that the instructors are going to put together a list of students that they think are ready to visit the human world for practical experience as a Shinigami on the job. Hopefully Jingoro Dono puts my name down. I can use a change of scenery. The one thing that bothers me is that I found out Aizen is a professor here at the academy teaching calligraphy. Hopefully he just keeps to himself. I'd rather not meet him if I can help it. Kishin was pulled out of his thoughts as he heard the whistle, prompting everyone to finish up their sparring practice. Kinji huffed and puffed as he fought to steady his breath. His back drenched in sweat. Kishin huffed. Did I huff improve? Kishin looked to the sky for a moment in contemplation before simply replying in his relaxed tone. Yeah, not bad. Your strikes feel like they have a weight behind them now. Not as floppy and flimsy as a month ago. Kinji smirked in triumph. Alright. If you say so then it must be true. Kishin smirked and grouped up where the other students were. Jingoro waited for everyone to gather before clearing his throat to get everyone's attention. Ahem. Next is Kido practice. Today I'll be assessing everyone's combat skill in Kido. You will be facing one of your fellow classmates in a one-on-one matchup. Only the use of Kido is allowed. No Zanjutsu, no Ho-Ho, and no Hakuta. Jujetsu Kishin. You're first. Okay. Jingoro-sensei. Kishin replied amiably as he walked out on the sparring field, however everyone else in the class fidgeted uncomfortably. Over the past 3 months they had witnessed Kishin's skill in Kido, and only one word could describe how everyone rated it. Fearsome. When everyone heard that Kishin was first, no one wanted to hear their name be called second, but they had no say in the matter. Jingoro shook his head at the class, noting their growing anxiety. He knew that no one else in the class could match Kishin's skill in Kido, but he had no choice. He needed to grade everyone in the class, and he couldn't just decide to give Kishin special treatment and have him skip out on the test. Everyone had to go through it and so, that's why he chose Kishin to go first. To get this outlier of a student out of the way so the rest of the students wouldn't be anxious about whether they'll be the ones facing him during the rest of the test. In the end Jingoro pointed to Kusumioji Takaki and said, alright. Takaki. You're second. Go on ahead. Takaki's face paled at the realization that he had been the one chosen to face Kishin. Their relationship didn't have a good start as the very first time they met he had ordered his henchmen to attack Kishin. In the end Kishin had made a fool out of him and his men. Jingoro smirked silently to himself as he watched Takaki gloomily make his way on the sparring field. This kid Takaki is too proud. He boasts so much about his skills and talks too much. He picks on the weak and makes fun of others just because he's from a high-ranking noble family. HMPF. Having him face Kishin might humble him a bit. Kishin smirked amusedly as he watched Takaki slowly stand opposite him on the sparring field. Oh. If it isn't Air, who are you again? He remarked sarcastically. Takaki clenched his fist in anger and irritation, but he kept it in. Why you ham Takaki? With an innocent-looking expression Kishin nodded and replied, right. So you're called Why you ham Takaki. I remember now. Sure got a strange name. Takaki was incensed once more, however he again swallowed his anger. This bastard. He's doing this on purpose. He knows exactly who I am. Their banter was cut short as Jingoro gave them the signal to start. Immediately Takaki placed out his palm and started the incantation for HADO number 31. Ye Lord. Mask of blood and flee. However Kishin lazily performed a swiping motion in front of him with 3 fingers and said, Bakudo number 1. Sigh. Immediately Takaki widened his eyes in shock and felt his arms lock behind his back, interrupting his incantation. Before he could free himself, Kishin placed his hands together and said, Bakudo number 4. Hanawa. The crackling yellow ball of energy gathered at his palms before he thrust out his hands, causing a yellow rope of energy to fly through the air and wrap itself around Takaki, binding him in a tight hold. As Takaki struggled with all his might to try and break free, Kishin slowly walked towards him and drew red symbols in the air, reciting an incantation, disintegrate, you black dog of Rondinini. Look upon yourself with horror and then claw out your own throat. Bakudo number 9. Jiki. He placed his hand on Takaki's shoulder just as he finished his incantation, causing a red light to glow off of his body and envelope Takaki, completely paralyzing him. It was then they heard Jingoro shout, stop. The match is over. Victory goes to Kishin. Kishin grinned and began walking away from a still restrained Takaki who yelled out, oh oi. Why you can't leave me like this? Oh oi. I'm Ta. Kishin cut him off as he interjected, ah. Seriously so noisy. Fine. Your voice itself is a powerful Kido. You could annoy the enemy to death. He then snapped his fingers, causing the yellow rope made of energy to dissipate around Takaki, freeing him from his bind. Takaki by now was filled with rage to the boiling point at Kishin's comment, so without warning, he pointed his finger at Kishin's turned back and shouted, Heido number 4. By Akurai. Crackle. The blue lightning beam shot straight at Kishin, causing Jingoro and the other students to widen their eyes in shock. While many didn't like Takaki, they didn't take him for a person who would attack someone so brazenly like this with their back turned, especially in front of an instructor. Takaki was after all, a member of a high-ranking family and therefore his actions partially reflected their image. Before Jingoro could intervene, Kishin placed his palm behind him and said, Bakudo number 8. Siki. The light blue energy sphere appeared behind him, intercepting the blue lightning strike and repelled it completely. Takaki immediately realized his mistake and panicked, however Kishin turned and glanced back at him with a dark gaze reflected in his eyes. He pointed his finger at Takaki and replied very calmly, but to Takaki, it was as if he had seen the devil. Takaki. Very bold move. Heido number 1. Show. Takaki panicked and shouted, wait. I'm sore. Bam. Before he could finish his sentence, a small amount of energy gathered at Kishin's fingertip before discharging with a powerful force and knocked right into Takaki's chest. The force of the small energy thrust was powerful enough to send Takaki crashing to the ground and rolling for a few dozen feet before coming to a stop. He groaned in pain and was still conscious, but otherwise didn't get up for fear that Kishin would strike him once more. As Kishin turned back around to face the class, he was met by the look of a frustrated Jingoro. Jingoro let out a sigh and had everyone practice Kido individually while he took both Kishin and Takaki to his office. Hey Kishin, Takaki. Do you two realize what you did wrong? Kishin had a look of indifference as he replied, I defended myself. Jingoro let out another sigh. Hey but in the end you attacked back, right? Jingoro-sensei, are you familiar with the phrase an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth? Jingoro could only rub his temples in frustration. So do I punish Kishin or do I not punish him? As for Takaki, although he comes from a high-ranking family, his actions today reflected poorly on the Kasumioji name. Still, in the end I'll likely have to leave his punishment to the Kasumioji family to decide upon. However, Kishin is quite astute. He probably also knows this as well and knows that most likely Kasumioji won't be punished appropriately. Most likely he'd get a light scolding and that'd be all. In fact, you'll probably be scolded for losing rather than for attacking a student from behind. Well, since no one got seriously injured, ahem. Here's what's going to happen. Takaki, I'll have to give a report to your family about this incident. You were in the wrong and your actions reflected poorly upon the status you hold. I hope you recognize this and work to improve on this in the near future. As for Kishin, you'll receive a warning this time. Although you were attacked from behind, you also shouldn't provoke people too much. Since no one got seriously injured, we'll leave things at that. Both Takaki and Kishin could only nod in agreement, and just as they both were leaving, Jingoro asked Kishin to remain behind. Jingoro-sensei, did you need me for something else? Kishin, like Hitsugaya Toshiro, you are a very rare generational genius. Please try to restrain yourself. Just a bit. You're leaps and bounds ahead of the other students here at the academy already. Any skill you use is potentially dangerous to the other students here. I understand that you couldn't let Takaki's actions go unanswered, however I hope that next time you would trust that I will handle the situation. Kishin clicked his tongue unhappily and crossed his arms but agreed. TCH. Very well. Jingoro once more rubbed the temples on his forehead. Perhaps I shouldn't have matched those two up. Each genius has their own extreme and unique personality, don't they? Captain Ichimura was cold, distant, and sarcastic. Toshiro was serious and stern. And now Kishin. He's mischievous, lax, and cunning. But each one was undoubtedly a genius on a different caliber than all the others. Jingoro was brought out of his thoughts by Kishin's voice. Sensei, did you need me for anything else? Ahem. Right, actually I wanted to ask if you were interested in being one of the students to attend the field trip to the human world to get some practical experience. Eh? I wasn't on the list already. Ingoro stared completely baffled at Kishin's question. This kid. He was that confident, huh? He just naturally expected to be placed on the list without the need for his input. Truly geniuses indeed have unique personalities. I can't ever get a good read on him. He treats Kinji well and doesn't bother most of the other students, however if you get on his wrong side, you'll pay the price dearly. I wonder if I'm listed on his good side or bad side. Wait, I'm a teacher. TCH. Why do I need to contemplate whether I'm on his good side or bad side? Ingoro-sensei. Are you alright? Ingoro rubbed the back of his neck apologetically realizing he had spaced out. Right, sorry. Where were we? Vishen smirked amusedly. I give my consent to be part of the group heading to the human world. Oh? Right. MN. Very well then. The field trip happens a month from now. Okay, then I'll be off. Jingoro-sensei. Kishin replied amiably as he began to walk off. Oh, Kishin. Vishen paused in his step and turned his head as he asked, yes. Ahem, how should I put this? For the next month try not to do anything troubling. Vishen smirked as he walked off and nodded. Okay, no worries sensei. As long as I'm not provoked. Ingoro just let out a defeated sigh as he watched Kishin's retreating form. As long as he's not being provoked he says, hey Kishin, oh Kishin. Are you sure it's not the other way around? As Kishin returned to the training field where the rest of the class was, he noted that Takaki had already returned. Kinji jogged over to him and curiously asked, so? What's the punishment? Kishin shrugged his shoulders disinterestedly. Nothing. Kinji raised his eyebrow in disbelief. You're lying. Was it an embarrassing punishment? Nope. Then you're serious about there being no punishment? Kishin smirked. Yup. Kinji could only stare at Kishin in awe. Man. How do you do it? I mean, Takaki was definitely in the wrong, but still for retaliating and getting no punishment. How can I be more like you? Kishin shook his head. I don't think you want to be more like me. You might just get into more trouble than it's worth. The rest of the class day went without incident. As Kishin walked off towards his dormitory he heard a voice behind him. A voice he wished he didn't hear. Tajetsu-kun. So we meet again. Kishin turned and fakely smiled. Captain Aizen. I didn't see you walk by. My apologies. Not at all. How are you finding life at the academy? It's alright I suppose. I see. I hear from the other teachers that you're the #1 student and have a high chance of graduating within the year. Congratulations. Thank you. If all goes well, that is the plan. Is that so? Did you know that there will be a field trip sanctioned by the academy to the human world next month? Kishin inwardly frowned but kept an outwardly amiable appearance. Aizen is definitely up to something. The way he brought it up sounds like he's expecting me to go. What kind of trouble is he going to cause while we're there? Damn him. I heard about it from Jingoro-sensei. Why do you ask? Aizen just smiled with his all too innocent looking expression. I was just curious is all. I'm sure you will be one of the students chosen to attend. Kishin was about to answer, but he took a momentary pause. Aizen, I see. You brought up the topic just in case I didn't know about it, so I would be aware and ask for more details from Jingoro-sensei. You probably also hoped that I would ask permission from Jingoro-sensei to attend. And if that didn't work out you probably would have pulled some strings to make it happen. Your acting is quite good. If I didn't know your true nature beforehand, it would have truly been difficult to know you were a traitor. What are you plotting? He was snapped out of his thoughts as Aizen said, well, I better get going, or I'll be late to my calligraphy class. If you're ever interested in calligraphy then do stop by. Your presence would be welcomed anytime. Kishin nodded as he watched Aizen walk away. During the rest of the month classes continued to go smoothly. Luckily no more incidents like the one with Takaki happened. Everyone continued to hone their skills until finally the day of the field trip arrived. Kishin arrived by the large encampment gate along with many of the other students who were attending the field trip. The trip was being led by 3 students, 2 male and 1 female, whose names were Rashi, Boga, and Kasumi. They were in their 6th and final year studying at the academy and had experience going to the human world several times before. As Kishin waited for the senior students to finish their speech his ears perked up at one small detail they had given. Did they just say that at some point during our trip one of the teachers at the academy will join us in the human world to assess how everyone is doing? Don't tell me Aizen. He was snapped out of his thoughts as the gate finally opened the portal allowing everyone to cross over. As Kishin followed everyone through he could only resign himself to the fact that there was a high possibility the teacher joining them later would be Aizen and that he had most definitely set something up. As they stood in the sky looking at the town below Rashi began his explanation. Alright everyone. We've arrived in Karakura town. We'll split up into 3 groups. One led by Boga, Kasumi, and myself. We're going to show you all how to perform the Kanso ritual and help souls in this world pass on to the Soul Society. Then, if possible some if not all of you will have the chance to perform the ritual yourself. Don't forget about safety. There are chances that hollows could appear. While not all the time it does happen. It is a Shinigami's duty to then also get rid of these hollows. We'll meet back here in 2 hours. Understood? Yes. Everyone acknowledged. After splitting up in 3 groups, Kishin dashed along behind Kasumi as he was placed in her group. She took a careful look at him before commenting, "Not bad. I heard you were some sort of prodigy, but still, your shunpo is pretty good to keep up with mine." "Oh? Is shunpo one of your strong suits, senpai?" Kasumi nodded proudly. "Heh, you could say that. I happen to be the fastest of all the year 6 students." Kishin raised his eyebrow a bit intrigued. "Oh? Now I'm curious." Before she could answer she spotted a soul so she directed everyone towards it. She showed everyone how to perform the Kanso ritual after a lengthy talk convincing the soul to pass on before they moved on. This continued for 2 hours before they returned to the meeting point. When they arrived it had already been quite late into the evening, so now it was completely dark. The moon shone in the sky and the stars illuminated the night, however Kishin frowned at this moment. Something feels off. It was then the loud cry of a hollow could be heard. Everyone turned their attention towards it as Boga said, "It's a hollow. Looks like just one. It'll cause trouble for the other souls in the area." Arashi nodded. "Boga, if you and I go together we can take care of it pretty easily." Asumi nodded in agreement. "I'll stay here and supervise the others." Kishin frowned as he felt that it wasn't that simple, but Boga and Arashi had already left. Everyone watched as they easily dispatched the hollow in a mere minute before returning. The students breathed out a sigh of relief as Arashi and Boga returned proudly, however in the next moment another cry of a hollow was heard. "Another one?" Kasumi exclaimed in confusion. Just as they turned to look where the cry came from they heard another cry. Then another and another and another. What, so many?" Kasumi exclaimed in shock. Arashi frowned in seriousness. 15 in total. We have to get out of here. Now. Just as they prepared to open a Sinkamen gate, one of the hollows leapt with great speed right at Arashi. Before it could strike him down Kasumi shunpoed next to him and pushed him aside, however she was now in the reach of the hollow's attack. Her heart skipped a beat as she knew it was the end. She shut her eyes and waited for the pain to hit her, however it never came. She was snapped back to reality when she heard a familiar voice. "Senpai, are you alright?" As she opened her eyes to look she stuttered in shock. Kishin, how?" Kishin smirked and awkwardly set her down, as carrying her taller frame and his currently small body looked a bit strange. He then replied smugly, "You said that you were the fastest shunpo user in year 6 right? I guess you could say that I'm pretty fast myself." She just stared at Kishin's small back in disbelief. "Why you saved me with shunpo?" From that distance. Kishin looked over his shoulder and gave her a wink. He then turned his attention back to the hollows. "Seniors, I don't think that these hollows are going to let us open a Sinkamen gate so easily. We should draw open a path for the other students to escape and one senior student should go with them to open a gate. I'll stay behind with 2 of you. Together we may be able to draw their attention and buy enough time for the others to leave. Then those of us remaining simply need to escape." Arashi grinned with nervousness and determination as he stood by Kishin's side. "You're gonna stay behind huh? Heh. As your senpai I can't let you stay alone. Allow me to join you." Boga nodded as he too stood by their side and said, "Kasumi. Go. Take the others with you and escape. We'll be fine." She wanted to retort, but Kishin didn't wait to listen as he shouted, "Hado number 33. Sakatsui." Just as a hollow jumped down from the sky he fired a powerful pale blue fire right at its mask. Boom. The mask was instantly crushed and the hollow dissipated into thin air. All the students including the senior students stared in amazement as the same thought ran past their minds. He performed a mid-level Kido without the incantation and it was actually strong enough to take out a hollow in one shot. Kishin cracked his knuckles as he said nonchalantly, "Kasumi senpai. Go." He then unsheathed his sword and disappeared in a flash with shunpo. His speed was so quick that none of the other students could follow his movements. Kasumi stared in awe but quickly returned to reality and ushered the students away in the distance while Kishin, Boga and Arashi kept the hollows focused on them. As 2 hollows rushed towards Kishin from the front and the back, he quickly said, "Bakudo number 21. Sekienten." Puff. A red plume of smoke immediately covered the area around him, causing the 2 hollows to lose sight of him. This allowed him to mask his movement and snuck up on the hollow behind him bisecting the creature right down the middle. He then turned and pointed his finger to where the other hollow had stopped and said, "Hado number 33. Sakatsui." Once again a powerful pale blue fire roared through the air and passed through the red smoke that he created earlier right into the unsuspecting hollow destroying it. Kishin smirked. "MN. I've been wanting to put my skills to use to see how I'd hold my own. Not too bad eh?" Just as a hollow arrived behind him and struck out with its large fist, he disappeared with Shunpo and arrived right behind its head. "Urara, you missed." The hollow turned its head at the sound of Kishin's voice, however the moment it did Kishin slashed its mask apart, effectively killing it. 4 down, 11 to go. He turned his attention to see how Arashi and Beigo were doing, however he frowned as he watched them struggle. Just as they were on the ropes defensively, Kishin placed out both his palms and said, "Bakudo number 4. Hinawa." Whoosh. Arashi and Beigo were shocked when they saw yellow energy rope wrap around them. Just as a hollow attacked them, Kishin gripped the rope tightly and pulled them all the way to his side before dispelling his Kido. Both Arashi and Beigo panted heavily as their strength was draining from the drawn-out battle. Kishin huffed thanks. Arashi said out of breath. Beigo nodded and commented out of breath as well. "You're huff a huff lifesaver." Kishin noted that Kasumi and the others were just about to leave through a Sinkamen gate when another Sinkamen gate opened up right before them. One person stepped out from it, causing everyone but Kishin to rejoice. Aizen, Kishin whispered under his breath with a frown. He watched Aizen easily dispatch a hollow that dashed straight for Kasumi and the others before he shunpo it with blinding fast speed, arriving right before Beigo, Arashi, and Kishin. "Oh? This many hollows have appeared here in Karakura town. Are you three alright? You did well to hold out this long." Aizen praised in his soft amiable voice. Arashi and Beigo saluted Aizen as Kishin simply nodded. Aizen stepped forth and pulled out his Zanpakuto, causing Kishin to inwardly flinch. Alarm bells rang in his head as he heard Aizen say, "With so many hollows to deal with at once, it leaves me no choice." Kishin knew immediately what was going to happen, so right before Aizen released his Zanpakuto, he took a step back, just making it into Aizen's blind spot, and squatted down to rest on the air. He pretended to look lax and tired and closed his eyes right as he heard Aizen say, "Kudakero, Kyoka Sujetsu." Right after Kishin confirmed that Aizen had finished his initial release of Kyoka Sujetsu, he opened his eyes and took note that Aizen had killed all the hollows. I knew Aizen was up to something. So was it because I drew too much attention? Being called a prodigy or genius at the academy probably placed me under his radar. He probably did the same to Jushiro when he heard that Jushiro was a genius at the academy. Then that means that the field trip, the hollows, it was all a ploy for him to make me see his Kyoka Sujetsu. He wanted to make its release seem natural and not forced, so I wouldn't be suspicious of him. HMPF. That bastard. How crafty. If I wasn't aware of its abilities beforehand, I would have definitely fallen for his trap. The problem now is that I'm not actually under his illusions, so he'll know once he tries to manipulate my senses. Aizen, oh Aizen. Unfortunately, you're not the only cunning one around. I squatted down and put on a tired expression for a reason. I'll pretend that I was tired from having to stall against the hollows, and this will give me an excuse for having closed my eyes and hence not falling under your spell. Kishin was brought out of his thoughts as Aizen sheathed his sword. He then turned back to look at Boga, Arashi, and Kishin, however his eyelids slightly twitched for just the briefest of moments as he carefully studied Kishin's current position and watched him yawn whilst rubbing his eyelid. He isn't under the effect of Kyoka Sujetsu's illusion. If he was, he would have moved from his spot. I shifted his perception slightly and made the battle seem more intense than it truly was. I made it seem like a hollow had appeared near him, but he looks completely unfazed and completely relaxed. In order to place him under Kyoka Sujetsu's hypnosis, he had to see it right as I activate its release command. Chijetsu-kun. How very interesting. Were you truly feeling tired and coincidentally closed your eyes right as I released my Kyoka Sujetsu? Or was it intentional? Have you somehow discerned the abilities of my Kyoka Sujetsu? No. That's not possible. After all, there are only 2 people in Soul Society who know of the true powers of my Kyoka Sujetsu. Tosen and Jin, and neither of them have yet to make contact with Kishin. Then he truly was just tired and it was coincidental. Heh. So all my planning to get him to see my Kyoka Sujetsu was for naught. Still. To think that he wasn't even curious at all what my Shikai would be. I have yet to meet a single person who was never curious to see what the abilities of a Captain Zanpakuto were until now. Most people would force themselves to remain conscious or awake and watch intently at the release of a Captain's Shikai, however it appears that same logic does not apply to this youngster. Very amusing and unexpected. Never once have I had to attempt to release my Shikai in front of someone I have specifically targeted more than a single time. Kishin yawned once more before standing back up and stretched his back as he said with an innocent and fakely surprised expression. "Oh. The captains of the Gate 13 really are amazing. You must be one of the strongest captains, right? Captain Aizen." Aizen kept his innocent and amiable smile plastered on his face and shook his head. "Not at all. I can only be considered average amongst the other captains. Come. We should probably return to Sirte." Kishin nodded as he followed behind Aizen and the other students through the Sinkamen and back to Soul Society. After returning, everyone quickly disbanded and went their separate ways. Kishin didn't want to stick around too long either, however he didn't want to leave too quickly and make it seem like he was avoiding confrontation with Aizen. In the end he remained for a few minutes, showing that he was completely relaxed and unconcerned about the incident before heading off. As he made it back to the academy grounds he took note of Jushiro's presence in front of the entrance. "What are you doing here?" he curiously asked. Jushiro glanced over at Kishin and inspected him for a moment before he let out a breath of relief. "Ah, so you're back." Kishin smirked knowingly. "So you heard about what happened already, huh?" Jushiro nodded in seriousness. The research and development organization were monitoring Karakura town as they knew students from the academy were heading there today on a field trip. They picked up on multiple hollow signatures and sent out an urgent message to inform all divisions. In the end we were informed that Captain Aizen was supposed to meet up with you all there, so the problem was left in his hands. Heh. I see. But that doesn't answer my question. What are you doing here? Jushiro embarrassedly coughed and looked away as he grumbled, "Nothing. I was just passing by and thought I'd pay Jingoro Dono a visit." Kishin shook his head amusedly and patted Jushiro on the back. "How nice of you to worry about my safety." Jushiro became even more embarrassed. "I didn't say I was." Kishin let out a laugh. "What, can't be honest with your feelings? It's alright. I'd be worried about my friend's safety too if I were in your position." HMPF. Who said we were friends? Jushiro pouted. Kishin could only shake his head. "For all your talk about not wanting to be called a kid, you sure are acting childish, don't you think?" A thick vein popped onto Shiro's head as he glared at Kishin's smug expression. "TCH. To think I was worried about your safety." Kishin watched as Jushiro stormed off so he called out, "See, you were worried. Was it so hard to be honest about it?" Jushiro simply kept walking away as he shouted back, "Who'd be worried about an idiot friend like you?" Kishin could only shrug his shoulders as he watched Jushiro disappear in the distance. It was then he heard Jingoro's voice behind him. "Wow, I've never seen this side of Hitsugaya-kun before. He's always been so serious and mature." Kishin turned around and yawned as he walked inside the academy. "Mature? He's more of a kid than you'd think, Jingoro-sensei. You just have to know how to push the right buttons." Jingoro watched Kishin walk off as he sighed to himself. "Push the right buttons, huh? I think only you would know how to do that. Chijetsu-kun." The next couple weeks went by without incident as Kishin sat in class. As he was about to get up and leave after the lesson was over, he was stopped by a Shinigami who wore the lieutenant's emblem on their shoulder. "You're Chijetsu Kishin, correct?" Kishin took a moment to observe who this was. They were meilen of an average build and wore the standard Shinigami Shihakusho, with the only main difference being the lieutenant emblem on their shoulder. They stood at a height of 178 centimeters and were light-skinned with short blonde hair and seemed to be around the age of 18 in human years. After finishing his observation he simply nodded and replied, "I am." "Your emblem, you're the lieutenant of the 3rd Division under Captain Ichimaru, correct?" "That's right. My name is Jin." "Oh, so you're Jin-senpai. Then, did you need me for something?" Jin nodded as he replied nonchalantly, "Did you know that sometimes exceptional students are given the opportunity to join other court division squads on missions?" Kishin nodded a bit wearily. "I do. Good. Then I won't waste too much time explaining. You're listed as one of the top students in the academy, and those listed at the top are given opportunities to gain experience with official division missions. As the lieutenant of the 3rd Division, I extend to you an invitation to join us for a week-long mission. We're traveling to the outskirts of Rukongai Eastern District number 50 to 60. The Research and Development Department has detected hollow activity in that area. Incidents like this are rare but not unheard of. We heard that you defeated several hollows on your own whilst in the human world and successfully protected the other students. What do you say, interested?" Kishin furrowed his brow for a moment, lost in his own thoughts. 3rd Division. Under Captain Ichimaru sounds like another ploy by Aizen, however it doesn't seem like Aizen will be tagging along. Perhaps he wants to observe me a bit under the guise of having me join up with the 3rd Division. Still, even though I know that Aizen is probably pulling some strings here, the mission sounds interesting. "Very well Aizen, I'll play along for now." Kishin snapped out of his thoughts and nodded in agreement. "When do we leave?" Jin smiled approvingly. "I can give you 3 hours to prepare. But we leave today." "Eh? Wasn't that a bit too short noticed?" Jin simply smirked. "Is that a problem?" Kishin also gave an amused smirk. "Heh. Interesting. Alright, no need for the 3 hours. Let's go now." Whoosh. In no time at all he joined up with the 50 other Division 3 members who were going and followed them towards Eastern District 50. As they were dashing through the air with their shunpo, the division members quietly chatted amongst themselves. "This kid. He can actually keep up with our shunpo. I heard he battled against 15 hollows in the human world and even managed to kill 4 of them. No way. It's probably an exaggeration. If any single one of us were to be faced against 15 hollows, I doubt we'd make it out alive, let alone kill 4 of them." They were probably swarmed, but Captain Aizen must have made it in time to save them. I don't know. Isn't that the reason why Lieutenant Jin asked him to join us? Because it's a fact that he killed 4 hollows on his own. Either way, it's impressive enough that he hasn't tired out from the constant use of Shunpo. So what? He's still just a kid in the end. I heard he's only 75 years old and that he's only been a Shinigami for 5 years. Just how skillful can he actually be, right? It'd be enough if he doesn't drag us down during our mission. The division members immediately shut their mouths as they met the glare of their lieutenant. Kishin obviously overheard everyone's conversations but couldn't care less. After several hours of traveling, they finally made it to the 50th district. Kishin took a casual glance at the division members and shook his head. DSK. They can talk the talk, but it doesn't seem like they can walk the walk. Look at them. Nearly half of them are tired out already. And it took so long to get here, having to travel at their speed. Out of the division members who came, only the lieutenant, 5th, 8th, 9th, 12th, and 13th C can claim to have a pretty good handle at Shunpo. It was then everyone heard Jin give his orders. Alright, split into 10 groups of 5 people. Each group will be responsible for 1 district all the way up to District 60. Once you have your group, then pick a district and head out. I will personally lead a group to District 57. According to R&D, that is where they picked up on the most recent hollow activity. Kishin, you stay here in District 50 and help out the others. There's still the potential of danger, but you won't be in the midst of the storm. Everyone understand? Yes, Lieutenant. They all responded. 888. In a dark room sat Aizen and Jin as they watched on a screen that was projecting the image of Kishin and the others out on their mission. What a shame. Your lieutenant didn't bring Kishin with him to the danger zone. Aizen remarked. Jin could only keep that unchanging smile on his face as he replied, Jin's in command now. I don't have any say. Is that so? Jin. Well, it doesn't matter. I wonder how he will handle stress and death on the battlefield. Jin kept his indifferent gaze on the screen, however he inwardly cursed Aizen before asking. Are you somehow planning to send him to the danger zone? Aizen smirked as an amused glint shone in his eyes. You don't mind if your Lieutenant Jin dies, do you? Jin inwardly flinched but showed no outward appearance that he cared. Yeah, he did so well on the paperwork. Oh well. He can always be replaced. Is that so? Jin. Then I'm glad to hear that. Once he dies, the other division members will know and rush in to assist. No doubt Kishin will be amongst them. Jin gave a curious glance at Aizen. Captain Aizen, why are you so intrigued by this boy anyways? I simply find him amusing is all. Our plan takes time. In that time I simply found some entertainment. Did you know, Jin, that he fought against 15 hollows and managed to kill 4 of them whilst at the same time as saving his classmates? Had I not shown up at all, who knows what the outcome would have been. Very likely he may have managed to kill all 15 of them, however I needed an excuse to show him my Kyoka Sujetsu, so I stepped in to help. Yet, even then the unexpected happened. He closed his eyes right before my Shikai activated, avoiding my spell. Jin was startled at this revelation. That kid didn't watch you unleash your Shikai. Aizen grinned. Correct. Amusing. Don't you think? Most people, especially the young, would have an innate and involuntary feeling of curiosity toward someone's powers. Especially one of the captain class, yet he behaved completely against all my expectations. I simply seek to understand his character more. Jin stared back at the screen that was currently focused on Kishin's image. Does he know about your Zanpakuto's power? Aizen smirked with confidence. No. The chances of him knowing are next to nil. Only 2 people know of my abilities. You and Tosin. I have faith that neither of you have told him about it. Right, Jin. Jin felt a formless pressure weigh down on him, however he didn't show that he was affected by Aizen's passive-aggressive threat and replied jokingly, me? Hahaha, surely you jest. Captain Aizen. Aizen once more smirked and returned his attention to the screen. That is why it is impossible for him to know of my powers, therefore it must be his character. He must simply be a carefree type of individual, hence I wish to observe his character a bit more if I am to succeed in placing him under my hypnosis. Jin slightly furrowed his brow. Captain Aizen, is it really necessary to have him under your hypnosis though? He's only a single person. You already have the Gate 13 captains under your spell along with all the lieutenants. Don't mistake me. Jin. I do not fear him, nor do I fear his potential. I simply believe he's amusing. And with his latent potential he may become a prominent individual in Soul Society one day. Having him under the effects of Kyoka Sujetsu means I can amuse myself some more and have all of the Gate 13 dance in the hand of my palm. Jin could only inwardly frown. Captain Aizen, you are indeed a frightening man. Captain Aizen, where is Tosin anyways? He's there. Hidden within the 57th zone. To prevent others from interfering with my entertainment. On the last and 7th day of the 3rd Division's patrol in the area, Aizen smirked and said, this is it. Now, don't disappoint me. Chijetsu-kun. 888. Ishin stood on the roof of a building in boredom as he watched the 5 other division members walk around. Sigh, nothing to do. The action's in the 57th zone, but from the reports we get from Jin, it appears they already took care of the hollows. Now everyone is just doing their own things until the mission time is over before returning. Isn't this a bit odd though? I thought Aizen was the one pulling the strings to get me on this mission, but maybe I overthought it. Just as Kishin was about to sit down and close his eyes, they received an urgent distress message through their Denrishinki sent from a member in the 57th district. The other 5 division members panicked as they exclaimed aloud in shock. What do you mean Lieutenant Jin was killed? No. It can't be. All the hollows were supposed to be wiped out already. Wait. How many did you say appeared? D20, that's overkill. Why did so many hollows appear at once? Ishin frowned as he took in the information. Oi. Your lieutenant just died and your other comrades are still out there. Are you guys just going to sit here and babble or are you going to get a move on? We're in District 50, the furthest from District 57. If you want any chance at helping your fellows then move out. Ishin's scolding immediately shocked the 5 division members he was with out of their panic and quickly nodded in agreement. Kishin smirked and stretched his legs before saying, I'll head over first. Catch up when you can. Before any of the others could respond, Kishin disappeared in a flash so fast that their eyes and brain couldn't register his speed. Whoosh. 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 Kishin dashed through the air as fast as he could as he contemplated what Aizen was trying to do. TCH. What are you up to, Aizen? 20 hollows. Why attack the lieutenant? I was sure he was targeting me and not Jin. Unless he wanted to force me over to District 57. But for what? I can't tell what he's thinking right now. Is it because he realized he failed to put me under his Kyoka Sujetsu? Is he starting to question whether I know about his Zanpakuto's powers? No, he's too calculating for that. Every move he makes is done with finesse, precision, and control. He's a master manipulator. He doesn't like it when something happens that he can't understand, so he always tries to formulate the most logical reason. At the very least, that's what I remember about him from my past life. And that's how other people described him as well. In that case then he probably bought into the fact that I just happened to be a lax person and his failure to place me under Kyoka Sujetsu was just a coincidence. But if that's the case, what's the purpose of doing all of this? In less than 20 minutes Kishin arrived on the outskirts of District 57. He took note that the members stationed in District 55, 56, and 58 were already here and also noted Jin's dead corpse on the roof of a building. Beside his dead corpse were also 3 other dead division members who were stationed here with him, meaning all those who were stationed with Jin in this district had died except one person, but that one person was gravely injured. Just as several division members facing a hollow were cornered, a powerful blue lightning strike pierced that hollow's skull, killing it instantly. This caught everyone's attention as they turned to look where that Kido attack came from. Kishin, they exclaimed. Their momentary distraction kept them from sensing another hollow that leapt up at them from beneath their feet. However, in mere moments Kishin shunpo it just in time and intercepted it, stabbing it right through the neck before slicing its head off. Oi, senpais. Why are you getting distracted in the middle of a life and death match? You can praise me later if you want. Kishin replied nonchalantly. His words broke the others out of their stupor as they refocused their attention. Senpais, how many of them are left? One of the members grit his teeth and responded, 16. Ishin raised his eyebrow a bit astonished. 16, after taking 20 minutes for me to get here, not including the 2 I killed just now, the rest of these guys only managed to get rid of 2. 2, what the hell are they doing? Ishin frowned and stared disapprovingly at the division members by him and remarked, Oi, tell me you all have a good reason why all of you could only manage to take out 2 of them during this time. They immediately felt flustered at Kishin's words, but they couldn't deny that it was true. It was then the only individual who survived in Jin's group came before them and explained. Be careful. Well, there were a lot of hollows, it isn't what killed Jin. There was a Jillian that ripped through the space for a brief moment and surprise attacked the lieutenant. The chain of our command crumbled and that's why we were defeated. Before anyone could respond to this revelation, Kishin shouted, Bakudo number 4. Hinawa. A crackling yellow energy rope shot from his hand and wrapped around the neck of an incoming hollow. He then gripped the rope tightly and swung to his left, causing the hollow to crash right into another one. He then quickly pointed at them and chanted, Ye Lord. Mask of flesh and bone, flutter of wings, ye who bears the name of man. Truth and temperance, upon this sinless wall of dreams unleash, but slightly the wrath of your claws. I hope you guys like fire. Heido number 33. Sakatsui. With the complete chant greatly increasing the power of his Kido, the pale blue flames crashed into not only the 2 hollows he stuck together, but it also crashed into one other hollow behind them, instantly killing 3 in one blow. He then shouted, Bakudo number 21. Sikinton. A giant red plume of smoke masked their presence as Kishin commanded, "Retreat to Jin's body and regroup." Immediately they all shunpo it away just in time before a group of 4 hollows dashed into the red smokescreen. Kishin stood off in the distance on the roof where Jin's dead body was and cracked his knuckles before he once again chanted the spell for Hado number 33. The power of his pale blue flames crashed into the 4 unassuming hollows that were still inside the red plume of smoke. Boom! The force of the blow caused the red smoke to scatter. After the destruction of the technique came to an end, 3 of the hollows had died and the last was left badly mangled. The division members could only stare in disbelief and awe at how powerful and skillful Kishin was with Kido. Kishin didn't care, nor did he wait for them to make a move. He smirked and felt adrenaline pump through his veins. He shunpoed right next to that beaten and battered hollow and cut off its head. Haha, is this the best you can do? Hollow. Haha, haha haha. Nice. Very nice. Young master. That's a good expression you have on. Just like that. Can you feel it? The adrenaline. The weight of your blade as it sinks into flesh and how light it feels the moment you cut off a head. It was then that Kishin realized that he was losing control. Oops, was I enjoying that too much? And this voice, I've heard it before. Go on. Kill them. They're nothing but hollow maggots. Can you feel the bloodlust in you? Use it. Control it. Master it. However, don't let it control you. Kishin wanted to respond, however he didn't have time to formulate his own thoughts as a hollow dashed right at him. He quickly shunpo it to his right before shunpoing once more by its face and struck, slicing its head clean off. 8 to go. He breathed out slightly out of air. What was that voice just now? Don't tell me it was him. He snapped out of his thoughts as he took note of a hollow jumping down at him from above with its mouth wide open. He pointed to its lower jaw and said condescendingly, "Your breath stinks." Hado number 1. Show. Bam. The force ejected from his finger crashed into the hollow's jaw, forcing its mouth shut. He then performed an upward slash, bisecting the hollow right down the middle. However, he was momentarily surprised as right after he bisected the hollow there was another hollow behind it. Kishin only had time to place his sword in a defensive stance and guard the punch that the hollow threw out. Wham! Although he successfully guarded, the force of the punch still sent his small body crashing down towards the ground. It was then he noticed that he was falling straight towards 2 other hollows that were waiting for him with their mouths open. Shit, I'm falling too fast, I can't stabilize my body in time to get a good footing for shunpo. He placed his left pointer finger on his left side and said, Hado number 1. Show. Bam. He discharged his own spiritual energy at his body, causing him to shift horizontally through the air, changing directions from where the hollows were lying in wait. He then took that chance to spin several times before finally stabilizing himself and coming to a stop. He let out a breath of relief as he quickly shunpoed away. Instantly the other hollows lost sight of him, however he had appeared right by the 2 hollows that were lying in wait for him earlier and slashed. Swish. Schlick. With 2 swings of his sword he successfully eliminated them. 5 to go. He said smugly. He took note of a hollow charging at him from behind and 1 from the front, so he directed 1 palm to each of them and chanted, "Disintegrate, you black dog of Ronanini. Look upon yourself with horror and tear out your own throat." Bakudo number 9. Horn. A yellow sphere of energy molded into a long yellow rope, fluidly maneuvering itself through the air and captured both hollows by the neck before dragging them through the air and stuck them together. Die. Hado number 11. Suzuri Raiden. A yellow electrical current discharged from Kishin's arms and traveled through the yellow rope before electrocuting the 2 bound hollows until they turned to dust. 3 to go. Kishin breathed heavily as he began to get tired. He widened his eyes in shock and quickly dashed to his right just as the ground beneath him shattered, revealing a hollow in hiding. He rolled on the ground a few times before getting back on his feet. He then immediately shunpoed away before he could be hit from behind by another hollow. He breathed heavily as he felt his movement start to slow. Damn, huff these huff bastards. Heh. Damn you too. Aizen. How'd he do it? These hollows are only targeting me even though I'm not the only one here. It was then he widened his eyes in shock as he felt an immense pressure behind him. He quickly turned and saw the space rip open, revealing a giant Jillian. The giant fist of the Jillian came crashing towards him, giving him only enough time to place his sword in front of him defensively. Bam. Do it. He spit out blood as his body was forced rolling uncontrollably through the air. He felt several of his ribs break from the reverberation of the punch against his sword. The bones in both his arms were also broken. The strength began to leave his body. As he began crashing towards the ground he could only muster enough strength to gasp and whisper, Bakudo number 37. Tsurubashi. Whoosh. From his badly broken palm gathered his Ryoku into the form of a blue ball of energy before shooting out behind him and creating a large elastic cushion that gently caught his falling body, preventing him from crashing into the hard ground and buildings. He watched as the Jillian slowly made its way over to him and smiled self-mockingly. Damn. To think that it'd get the jump on me. How did it do it? There's no way I wouldn't have noticed something with that much Ryatsu show up behind me unless there was some sort of interference. He glanced to see what the current state of the other division members were, however he was shocked. What the hell happened? Why are they all knocked out? TCH. This doesn't look too good for me. Hahaha. Not too good indeed. You. Your voice went silent. I didn't think I'd hear you again. And right now at that. Seems you're in a pinch. Young master. TCH. Young master. Then you really are. Oh? Seems you're in luck. Ishin widened his eyes in surprise as he felt two familiar Ryatsu signatures. Just as one of the remaining three hollows jumped down from the sky to attack him, he heard Rukia's voice shout, Heido number 33. Sakatsui. CRRRRRSSSHH. The sound of the pale blue fire struck the hollow in the face before she arrived right in front of it and slashed its head clean off. And just as the Jillian was about to charge up a red zero, he heard Toshiro's voice shout, sit upon the frozen heavens. Hyorin Meru. Ishin watched as a giant blue dragon made of pure ice crashed right into the Jillian's face and froze it completely before he saw Toshiro arrive in front of him. Ishin. Are you alright? It was then Rukio also appeared by his side inspecting his wounds before letting out a sigh of relief. Seems we made it just in time. Hang on Kishin. We'll get you out of here. Clink. Clink. Clank. The ice that froze the Jillian's face broke as it let out a roar in anger, however they all heard and saw the same thing in the next moment. Shoot to kill. Shinso. Whish. A thin silver light flashed through the Jillian's head, effectively killing it as the light then dissipated, revealing a thin sword slowly retracting back to Jin's side. He then walked over to Kishin, Rukia and Toshiro and asked nonchalantly, phew. Made it just in time. Is everyone alright? Chapter 4. 6 months later, Kishin yawned as he stood in line behind Kinji who simply shook his head at his friend's lax expression. Boy, Kishin. This isn't a time to be sleeping you know. Kishin lazily rubbed his eyes as he replied, but I'm bored. Kinji could only let out a sigh of defeat. You know that your exam is different from ours right? Right now we're performing the end of the year proficiency test, but you're taking the graduation test. That means that the qualifications for you to pass are different than us. We merely have to perform a series of low-level Kido, since that's the skill level that most of us are at right now after just 1 year at the academy, but you have to perform mid-level Kido with proficiency. Stay focused will you? Ishin smirked and smugly replied, Kinji oh Kinji, that's right. I've only ever used low-level Kido in class huh? About performing mid-level Kido, there's no need for you to worry about it. I'm not even worried about it and I'm the one who has to perform said spell. Kinji rubbed his temples. Hey I wish I could be as confident as you. What? Your specialty is Kido. This will be a cinch for you. Well I know that. I was worried for your sake, but I suppose if you're taking it so easily then you must really have this in the bag. They were interrupted from their conversation as Kinji was called next to the field, leaving Kishin to his own thoughts. To this day I still have no idea why Aizen planned that attack on Lieutenant Jin and why he decided to lure me over to District 57. Was it to test my skills? To see what my true capabilities were? Is that why he somehow got 20 hollows to attack that day? And on top of that I'm pretty sure he had something to do with the reason why I couldn't sense that damn Jillian when it ripped a hole through space to get behind me. Luckily R&D was also notified of the attack at the same time we were so they sent backup. Obviously Jin was sent. It was his division after all. I heard in my past life that Jin was actually not a bad guy, but how exactly? Anyways I suppose I was lucky that Rukia and Toshiro appeared when they did. He was brought out of his thoughts after Kinji performed several low-level Kido spells and one mid-level Kido spell, allowing him to pass on to the next test. It was now Kishin's turn as he stood on the field. A different proctor that judged those who wished to take the graduation requirement test stood up and watched intently. The proctor then said, Jujetsu Kishin of Class 1. Exam type, graduation. Give us a performance of the best Kido you can use. I shall judge you based on the power and execution of your technique. Kishin nodded and placed his right palm in front of him saying, Bakudo number 37. Tsurubashi. A blue light flew from his hand onto the field and created a giant elastic net as he then said, Heido number 54. Heian. He swiped his hand in the direction of the elastic net, causing an ovular crimson energy blast to crash into it. Immediately it was lit aflame and burned away until nothing of the elastic net was left. As a large plume of smoke rose in the air from the burning he then placed both palms out and said, Heido number 58. Tenrin. Whoosh. A large gust of tumultuous wind blew from his hands and instantly dispelled the smoke, as if it were never there. Kishin grinned at his work and waited for the proctor to say something, however he took note of how deadly silent the entire exam field was at that moment. Everyone's jaws had dropped to the floor and even the proctor couldn't believe his eyes. Ishin just shrugged his shoulders and asked nonchalantly, is my test over or should I do more? His question snapped the proctor out of his daze as they replied, right. That was enough. Ahem. You may take your leave and head over to the next exam site. Ishin nodded amiably and left a still completely stunned and shocked room filled proctors and students. As he made his way over to the Ho-Ho training site, he took note of Kinji about to perform his proficiency test in Shunpo. Kinji stood on the starting line as before him was a long field with markers set every meter apart. As the examiner gave the signal to start, Kinji immediately used his Shunpo. Whish. In the end his one Shunpo landed him at the 10-meter mark. He let out a sigh and walked off the field catching sight of Kishin, so he dashed over. Hey, so how'd your keto test go? Kishin put on a pondering look before replying nonchalantly. Pretty good I think. Kinji just gave a questioning glance as he watched Kishin walk to line up. Once again when it was his turn, a proctor for the graduation requirement exam stood forth. Kagetsu-kun, the requirement to pass is to reach the 30-meter mark in one go. Kishin nodded and unconcernedly stretched his legs as he stood before the starting line. Once the signal was given to start, he immediately turned into a blur before reappearing in the distance right at the 30-meter mark. His speed was so quick that the proctor was still gazing at the starting line. It took them several seconds to realize that Kishin wasn't there anymore, prompting them to turn their gaze to the field, causing them great shock. That's so fast. Everyone exclaimed in shock. Once again Kishin just shrugged his shoulders and walked away as he asked, so, what now? The proctor cleared his throat. Ahem. That is all. You have completed the exams for the general knowledge portion, Reiatsu Control, Zanjutsu, Hakuta, Kido, and now Ho-Ho. Your final grade shall be released tomorrow where you will be told whether or not you passed. Kishin nodded amiably before walking off with a stunned Kinji behind him. Why you're that fast, are you planning to join the Onmitsukido? Or perhaps Division 2 under Captain Soifon? Kishin shook his head. First, those two groups are essentially the same now. And to answer your question, not really. Or maybe. I mean, I wouldn't mind Division 2, but Captain Ukitake was the one who took me in and taught me. Plus they're missing a lieutenant. I was thinking of earning some merit so I could fill in that position for the captain to help alleviate his burdens a little. Even though there are 2/3 seat officers in the 13th Division helping out, I don't know how well it's working out for them. Maybe after helping Captain Ukitake for a while I'll see whether or not Division 2 is right for me. And besides, once I graduate I'll have to take another exam to join the Gate 13. Then once I'm accepted into the Gate 13 I don't even get to choose my first division. They'll technically place me wherever they see fit and I'll serve in that division for a bit before I can choose. I might even end up serving under multiple divisions first before I end up as a lieutenant for Captain Ukitake. Then again, if Captain Ukitake makes his request of me directly, then I can skip all the trouble of serving under different divisions and go straight to the 13th Division. In the end, I haven't completely thought it through yet. Kinji couldn't help having his jaw drop to the ground at Kishin's response. Why, you're pretty confident that you're gonna graduate, huh? And you said once you're accepted, not if you're accepted, meaning you don't think getting into the Gate 13 will be difficult at all, right? Kishin smiled lazily. You tell me. What do you think my chances are at getting in? Kinji didn't even have to think twice as he replied, they'd be idiots not to let you in. See? Even you think so. Kinji could only let out a sigh in defeat. Who am I supposed to partner up with now, Kishin? Once you leave I'll be left all alone. Kishin simply patted Kinji's back. Oi, don't be like that. You're more sociable than I am. People are less afraid to approach you than they are to approach me. You'll be fine. Kinji could only nod as he lamented the fact that Kishin wouldn't be in the academy with him anymore. The next day Kishin checked his score for the graduation exam and was notified that he had passed, becoming the third person in all of Seoul Society's history to graduate in a single year. Afterwards he applied to join the Gate 13 and passed the entrance exam with no difficulties, so he awaited his division placement. He sat in the waiting area of the Gate 13 exam building and simply observed the other people around him who had also taken the test. In less than 20 minutes he was received by another Shinigami, however Kishin was slightly surprised at who it was. Sorry, I hope I didn't keep you waiting very long. I got here as quickly as I could once our division was notified that you were placed in our ranks. Let me introduce myself. I'm Kira. Izuru Kira. 3rd seat of Division 3 under Captain Ichimaru. Pleasure to meet you, Chijetsu-kun. Kishin was a bit dazed as the realization hit him that he was placed in Division 3. This was definitely Aizen's doing. He didn't want to make it seem suspicious and place me directly under his watch, so he put me in Division 3 to have Jin report on me. That's it, isn't it? Not that he would suspect me of suspecting anything. But it makes him seem more trustworthy if something troublesome happens around me, giving him the opportunity to step in and help. He can play it off as him not being directly involved with me yet was kind enough to help me. He'll probably want to try and gain my favor this way. Then once again he'll probably plot to try and show me his Kyoka Sujetsu. I avoided it once, but the key is can I do it again? If I avoid it too many times he may start to actually suspect that I know of its powers. But why me? Why is he so interested in me? TCH. It's definitely because I happened to avoid his Kyoka Sujetsu that one time. If I had just fallen under his spell he probably wouldn't even bother paying attention to me anymore, but because he failed he's been slightly intrigued. Damn it. And going back to the topic of placing me in Division 3, he knows that I fought alongside their members before, so he thinks that I'll just feel it was the natural choice of my placement. To think that Aizen has this much control even over the small aspects of division member placement. Kishin quickly shook himself out of his thoughts and shook Kira's hand as he replied, "You can just call me Kishin." "Oh? Very well then you can just call me Kira. It's actually quite an honor to have you join our squad as you're the third person in all of Soul Society to ever graduate from the academy in a single year. The other being Hitsugaya Toshiro and of course our captain, Ichimaru. Your skills are excellent and have been recognized by the Gate 13. You've also accomplished some incredible feats even while you were at the academy, so you've automatically been given a seated officer position of the 4th rank in our division." 4th seat huh? That was quick. Kira then began walking off as he said, "Follow me. I'll show you to the 3rd division barracks." Kishin nodded and followed as he couldn't do anything about his placement except accept it for the time being. "Kira-senpai, did you serve under multiple divisions before you were placed in the 3rd division?" Kira nodded. "Actually I did. I was first placed in the 5th division before being transferred to the 4th division. And then I finally moved to the 3rd division. I started out at the 5th seat but moved my way up to the 3rd seat. By the way Kishin, I wanted to thank you. About 6 months ago during that incident when you joined some of the members of the 3rd division in patrolling the 50th to 60th district of East Rukongai, you saved many of my fellow division members. I've heard of your amazing feats from them and they have been eternally grateful ever since." Kishin let out a sigh as he recalled that day knowing it was all set up by Aizen. "There's no need to thank me. In the end I was lucky and was saved just in time. My condolences about Lieutenant Jin's passing." It wasn't long before they made it to the 3rd division grounds where Kishin was immediately greeted and swarmed by the members who had survived that fateful day. They began to give words of thanks and praise here and there that it was a bit overwhelming for him to take in. They were then interrupted by the sound of Jin's voice. Oh yeah, it's Sujetsu-kun." Kishin turned and greeted nonchalantly, "Captain Ichimaru. We couldn't properly get introduced all those months ago. Thanks to you destroying that Jillian we made it out alive." Jin observed Kishin's frame for a moment in careful consideration before replying in his own nonchalant tone, "Not at all. In fact it should be me thanking you for saving the members of my division. If you weren't there I'm afraid the casualty count may have increased. Well it would have definitely increased by one more, myself, if you hadn't come when you did. Captain. Hahaha. You're quite humble aren't you? Actually it's quite the opposite. I simply speak my mind." "Oh? I see. I hope being placed in the 3rd division won't be too hard on you as I know you didn't have a choice in the matter." "Not at all. I'm here to gain experience. And I'm already acquainted with some of the members. I already feel like one with the team." "That's so? Then I'm glad." "Ah, right. Congratulations on obtaining the 4th rank officer seat. Another testament to your prowess." "Thank you very much Captain. I'll ensure not to shame the rank I was given." "Amen. I trust that you'll do just fine. Oh, I should also congratulate you for graduating in a single year at the academy." "It's fine Captain. It wasn't very hard. Of course you would know all about that. After all, you were the first to graduate from the academy in a single year and paved the way." Oh yeah. I wanted to praise you a bit more, but it turns out I'm the one being praised instead." Kishin just smiled without responding, prompting Jin to smile back. The both of them had secretly been trying to probe what the other person's kind of character was throughout their conversation, however they both came to one single conclusion. He's secretly very cunning and doesn't give too much away about himself. It's almost like I'm talking to myself. All the division members who watched this conversational exchange between the captain and Kishin couldn't help but feel extremely awkward. To them it seemed like they were watching two blades carefully dance around the other. One would attempt a jab, but the other would deflect and in the next moment they would counter with a slash. That's what the conversation looked like to them, however, even if that's what it looked like it didn't feel like it was dangerous at all. On the contrary, to put the metaphor back in perspective, it felt more like the captain and Kishin were dancing around and sparring with flimsy plastic swords. That was a more apt description. In the end Jin pulled out some hashigaki, which were dried persimmons, from his haori and tossed it to Kishin who caught them. "A greeting gift. From me, Chijetsu-kun." As Jin walked away he waved his hand in the air and said, "I look forward to working with you." Kishin stared at Jin's retreating form in the distance and smirked amusedly to himself as he took a bite out of the hashigaki in his hand. Man. Not bad. The days and weeks passed on quite peacefully during his time in the 3rd Division, surprisingly. The 3rd Division didn't really have a specific task or role other than to protect Sirte if it was attacked, so for the most part, he had plenty of time to himself which he completely dedicated to training. As he was currently practicing some of his Zanjutsu skills in the training field, he took note of Kira's presence, so he paused momentarily. Kira walked over to him with a look of admiration on his face. "Kishin, your Zanjutsu skills are amazing." Kishin looked down at the katana in his hand and simply shrugged his shoulders. "I suppose I'm alright. Anyways, Kira-senpai, did you need me for something?" "Right, did you know that Captain Aizen of the 5th Division is holding a lecture today at the 5th Division barracks? It's free for anyone to attend, and he'll be covering topics like Kido, Zanjutsu, calligraphy, poetry, and literature. I was wondering if you'd be interested in attending. Me and some other division members are going there now." Kishin raised his eyebrow curiously. "What about Captain Ichimaru? Is he going to be here in the barracks?" Kira simply shrugged his shoulders. "I'm not really sure. To be honest, we don't really know where he is most of the time." Kishin had a pondering look as he simply replied, "I see. So? Interested in tagging along?" Kishin smirked as he turned around and swung his sword. "It's alright. I'm fine here. Perhaps next time. I was going to pay Captain Ukitake a visit today anyways." Kira had a look of disappointment but nodded his head. I see. That's too bad. You'll be missed at the lecture." "Man. Tell me how it goes." Kira could only let out a sigh in defeat. "Alright. I will." Kishin turned around and stared at Kira's retreating form until he disappeared. It was then he felt an eerie, subtle, watchful eye on him, so he smirked and said, "Captain Ichimaru. So you were on the division grounds today. No one knew where you went." Jin smiled as he walked out from behind a tree and praised, "Yeah, not bad, not bad. Your Ryukaku sensing is pretty good." Kishin shook his head as he turned around to face Jin. "Just a little." Jin took a moment to carefully study Kishin, unsure of what to think before asking, "You're not interested in Aizen's lecture? I hear they are quite popular. Even the class he teaches, calligraphy, at the academy is always overfilled." "That may be, however I plan to visit Captain Ukitake today. I haven't seen him since joining the 3rd Division." "Oh? Why not go tomorrow? After all, Aizen doesn't give out free public lectures like this every day." "It's fine. If I have questions I can always ask you, right Captain? Besides, I just graduated from the academy. I'm not really interested in hearing any more lectures for a while." "I see. So that's how it is. Well, that's fine. If you ever have any questions then you can always come to me, though I can't guarantee I'd be a good teacher." Kishin watched as Jin walked off before he furrowed his brow and sheathed his sword, slowly leaving towards the 13th Division. They really wanted me to attend Aizen's lecture, huh? He's going to be lecturing on Zanjutsu as well. I'm not an idiot. Another one of his ploys to make me see his Kyoka Sujetsu. He'll probably release its power to show the others trying to incorporate it into his lesson when he really is just placing everyone under his hypnosis. He's quite crafty, coming up with so many indirect ways to place people under his control without them ever realizing it. Kishin snapped out of his thoughts as he finally reached the 13th Division grounds. As he walked in he was amiably greeted by the familiar faces of the division members, including one Kichiki Rukia. "Kishin. What are you doing here?" "Senpai, what do you mean? I came to visit, of course." Oh, right. I was just surprised is all. I'm sorry I couldn't come congratulate you when you passed the entrance exam for the Gate 13. So, how are you liking the 3rd Division?" "It's fine, Rukia-senpai. It's not a huge deal." "What do you mean it's not a big deal? Entering the Gate 13 is a big milestone." Kishin just shrugged. It was to be expected. Rukia let out a sigh and face palmed. "Right, haha, where do you gain so much confidence?" Kishin smirked. "Ability." Once more Rukia let out a sigh. They were both interrupted by the sound of Jushiro's voice. "Oh, Shin-chan. You're here." Kishin waved and greeted Captain Ukitake. "Ahahaha, your presence has been missed. You're the only one who Rukia-san seems to be able to relax around." Rukia let out a choking cough at Ukitake's comment, prompting Kishin to comment, "Really? I don't know about that. It seems Rukia-senpai is warming up to you, Captain." Rukia cleared her throat and interjected, "Ahem. Don't speak as if I can't hear you." But senpai, I'm speaking because I want you to hear me." "Why are you taking into account how I feel?" Kishin put on an innocent look and asked, "Then how do you feel?" Rukia was at a loss for words as she didn't know how to respond. She hoped Kishin would just intuitively know how embarrassed and awkward she felt at that moment, however she kept her expectations too high. No, rather she knew that Kishin knew, but he was doing it on purpose. In the end Rukia excused herself as she was heading off to the Kichiki Manor, leaving only Kishin and Jushiro behind. As the two of them sat down on the side of the courtyard drinking some tea, Jushiro asked concernedly, "Kishin, are you being treated well in Division 3? Vishen replied nonchalantly, "MN. No worries there. I find Captain Ichimaru quite interesting to say the least." He then picked up a piece of candy from the pile that Jushiro placed on the table between them and popped it in his mouth. Jushiro smiled happily as he watched. Sigh. It's a shame that he wasn't placed in the 13th division. He could technically apply for a division after a year of serving in the division he was placed in. With his abilities, despite his young age, he would make a good lieutenant. The 13th division is missing one. As captains have the ability to choose their lieutenants, I could ask him. But what if he doesn't want to? If he were to become my lieutenant, he'd have to do not only the work required of him as a lieutenant, but my work as well due to my health. Jushiro was snapped out of his thoughts when he heard Kishin ask, "Captain Ukitake, what can you tell me about Captain Aizen?" Jushiro was a bit taken aback at the question, but gave it some serious thought. "Captain Aizen, huh? I suppose he's very nice. He is very good at calligraphy and likes to help others in need. He's good at giving lectures and teaching. Oh, by the way, that reminds me, he's holding a lecture today. How come you didn't go? Or did you not know?" Vishen shook his head. "I know about it. I'm just not interested. I graduated from the academy not too long ago and have had enough of lectures for now." Jushiro nodded understandingly. "So, why are you so curious about Captain Aizen?" Vishen thought about how to answer as he popped another piece of candy in his mouth. "Well, everyone seems to really like Captain Aizen, so I was just wondering what he was like." "Oh? If you really want to know, wouldn't that be all the more reason for you to sit in on one of his lectures?" Vishen shook his head. "No. I think I'd rather come to you for advice and pointers if I ever have any, Captain Ukitake." Jushiro felt his heart warm inside at Kishin's straightforward answer and sheepishly rubbed the back of his head. "Ahaha, you flatter me. I don't know if I'm that good of a teacher, but I'll do my best. Don't worry about that, Captain. It was because of your teachings that I'm currently so skilled in Kido and Ho-Ho. But on the topic of Captain Aizen, does he give you a strange feeling sometimes, Captain? Like he's perhaps too nice? Or too friendly?" Jushiro thought about it for a moment before shaking his head. "Well, I haven't really thought about it. We captains don't meet too often these days. Well, Captain Aizen and I are on friendly terms. We don't go out of our way to visit one another. The only other captain that I see most often is Captain Kairaku." "I see. Well, I just thought I'd let you know. I just have a feeling that something is off about Captain Aizen. I can't really place my finger on it. Call it a kid's hunch." Jushiro tilted his head sideways in curiosity. "A kid's hunch?" Vishen grinned and nodded. "Yeah. You know what they say. Kids pick up on things that adults can't. They just have feelings, you know. Like they can tell when someone has a terrible personality or when someone is very nice or when someone is very sad. Stuff like that." Jushiro blinked his eyes even more curiously as he asked in amusement, "Then Shin-chan, are you calling yourself a kid?" "Hahaha. Good. Shin-chan, I was worried that you were growing up too fast, but I'm glad that you wish to be a kid a little longer." Vishen inwardly sighed and rubbed his brows in defeat. I wasn't exactly trying to say that." Jushiro just continued to smile amiably and placed more candy on the table, to which Kishin didn't mind. He picked one up, popping it into his mouth. "Captain, I'm being serious here. Anyways, I just wanted you to know. Even if you and Captain Aizen are on good terms, I don't get a good vibe from him, so you should at least be more cautious around him and his actions." Jushiro stared at Kishin for a moment and noticed that Kishin was actually very serious, so he furrowed his brow and nodded. "Alright. I'll keep what you said in mind then." They both sat in silence for another few minutes before Kishin broke the silence. "Captain Ukitake. Have you ever thought about looking for another person to fill in the position of lieutenant?" Jushiro flinched a bit in surprise as he was thinking about that earlier. He nodded and replied, "Actually I have." "What do you think about me, Captain?" Jushiro was momentarily shocked. Did he read my mind? Or perhaps he wanted to become the 13th Division lieutenant for a while now. Ahem. "Actually, I did think about you. Did you actually want to fill in the position?" Vishen stared down at his cup of tea for a moment in silence as he thought about it. "Captain. I would like to eventually fill in the position of lieutenant if you would have me. You were the one who helped me learn and grow, so I want to help you in return." Jushiro raised a curious eyebrow. "Eventually, huh? So that means not right now then, right? I'm currently stationed in Division 3, but that might not always be the case. I hear that it's common for division members to transfer to multiple divisions before sticking to one place." Jushiro nodded in agreement. "True. Does that mean you're expecting to transfer, or are you planning to apply for a transfer to another division?" Vishen nodded. "I am. I plan to remain in Division 3 for a year and then try to transfer to other divisions. I want to gain some more experience first and see what the other divisions are like before settling in." Jushiro nodded his head approvingly. "Man. That's actually very mature of you, Shin-chan. Then does that mean after you're done gaining the experience you want, you'll become my lieutenant?" Vishen nodded. "Captain Ukitake. I do have a request though. Oh? What is it? Kishin picked up a piece of candy from the table and said, if you ever hear me say that I want to try a different kind of candy, then regardless of which division I'm currently stationed at, I would like you to immediately make me your lieutenant. Is that possible? Jushiro flinched in confusion and curiosity. He studied Kishin carefully for a moment before responding. What do you mean? Kishin looked at the piece of candy in his hand for a moment before smiling and replying amiably, I believe it's called a secret. Jushiro felt like he got cold water dumped on him as he was expecting a serious answer. Then again, after knowing Kishin all these years, his current answer wasn't a surprise either. Wait, can you really not tell me? Kishin popped the candy into his mouth and chewed. It wouldn't be a secret otherwise, would it? Jushiro could only awkwardly laugh. I see. So Captain, is it possible? I don't mean to pressure you. I know I said it's a secret, but the truth is you would really be saving me a lot of trouble. So if I ever hear you say that you want to try a different kind of candy, then that should be when I ask you to be my lieutenant, alright? I can do that. Although it feels like I'm being pulled into one of your pranks. Kishin smiled after hearing Jushiro's acceptance of his request. Don't worry, Captain. It's nothing like that. Right. Can you keep this a secret between the both of us? Please don't tell anyone about this. Not even Captain Kairaku. Now Jushiro was extremely curious about what was going on, but elected to leave it at that, as he didn't find that keeping this secret would bring anyone any harm, so he nodded his head. Very well, I promise not to reveal our secret to anyone. Kishin inwardly grinned and also inwardly let out a sigh of relief. Phew. Great. I've taken my first countermeasure against Aizen. For myself at least. I know he must have played a hand at having me placed in the 3rd division. I know he's secretly observing me. Probably for some messed up entertainment. After today learning that he was giving a lecture and one part was going to be on Zanjutsu, I knew he was definitely aiming for me. Maybe not just me, but I'm sure I'm included in his list of targets to place under complete hypnosis. Since he has some authority over where I could be placed, it's possible he'll eventually have me placed under his direct supervision in the 5th division. TCH. Like I'd just sit around and let you toy with me, Aizen. If I'm placed in the 5th division, I'll just tell Captain Ukitake our code and he'll ask me to be his lieutenant. Then I'll accept and leave the 5th division permanently, and this will prevent Aizen from transferring me to a division under his control. Aizen always plans 5 steps, 10 steps, 100 steps ahead. If I don't want to be played in the palm of his hands, then I have to start building shields and redundancy plans for myself just as far ahead. Kishin took a sip of his tea before he thought of something else. Captain, what can you tell me about Central 46? I remembered reading about them in some of the books, but are they truly absolute in their rulings? Jushiro pondered for a moment at the question before letting out a sigh. Well, since you've read about them before from the books in our division, then you already know that Central 46 is composed of 40 wise men and 6 judges appointed from all over Soul Society. The power and control they have was a right and privilege granted to them by the Soul King. They also set certain laws in place that should one break, they shall be judged by the Central 46. The punishments can be quite harsh. Kishin nodded and chimed in, if I recall, the Soul King exists in a different dimension than Soul Society, the human world, and Hueco Mundo. That's right. The Soul King doesn't govern the Soul Society itself. Central 46 does in its stead. That is why Central 46 has such power and authority. Not even the Captain Commander can go against their ruling. But why are you curious about them? Kishin stared at his cup of tea in deep contemplation for a moment. After a few moments passed in silence, he continued, I was just curious, Captain. After all, there wasn't too much information on them, and they are an integral part of Soul Society's function. I just wanted a better understanding. Jushiro nodded. It's good that you want to learn more. Captain, I know I already made a request of you earlier, but I actually have one more. Jushiro raised his eyebrow, extremely curious as Kishin had never made requests of him before. Sure, he's asked questions and for information, but true requests outside the scope of teaching him, it was a first. And it wasn't just one request, but now 2. Go on, Shin-chan. If it's in my power, then I'll do my best. Then, this one is about Rukia-senpai. Rukia? Jushiro exclaimed, completely shocked. Kishin nodded. If there ever is a need to station someone in Karakura town and Rukia's name comes up, please deny it. Jushiro was completely baffled at this point. I wonder what's going on. Shin-chan, is there something troubling you? Kishin could only take a sip of his tea before staring out at the sky. Not really, Captain Ukitake. You know how I am. Jushiro scratched the side of his cheeks, unsure of what to say. Kishin noted this and continued, how to put this? Well, it's more personal. You see, Rukia-senpai and I are close. Jushiro tilted his head to the side, intrigued, and nodded in agreement. Right. Well, I agree with you on that. You are the only person where I've seen she relaxes her guard around. So what does this have to do with not stationing Rukia in Karakura town? Let's just say that it's a secret between Rukia-senpai and I. If she is to be stationed in a town, then perhaps somewhere like Kagamino City. Anyways, if Rukia-senpai is one day stationed for Karakura town instead of her, request that I go in her stead. Or someone else in the division. Jushiro was a bit taken aback by everything. Well, I mean, I suppose it isn't outside the realm of possibility that Rukia could be stationed there. The 13th division is, after all, in charge of overseeing Karakura town. I don't believe she'll be stationed there anytime soon, as she is still working on improving her skills. However, to comply with your request, I suppose I could choose not to station her in Karakura town. The thing is, I can't send you in her stead since you aren't currently a member of the 13th division. And the one caveat is that if it is a decision made by Central 46 or the majority rule during a captain's meeting, then I won't have too much power over it. Of course, if you are the lieutenant of the 13th division during the time that Rukia is ever supposed to be sent to Karakura town, then it becomes easier for me to prevent Rukia from being stationed there. But the lieutenant in place, then Sentaro and Kian, no longer have to be here to perform some of my duties and the duties of a lieutenant. It would give me more options to work with. But does Rukia-san really have a secret about not wanting to be stationed in Karakura town? Ishin gave Jushiro a convincing smile and replied, that is a secret between us. I hope this isn't too troublesome of a request. Jushiro tilted his head in confusion and intriguement, but nodded his head anyways. I see. Well, I suppose it isn't in my place to pry open secrets between friends. Hahaha. Having secrets between friends makes their bond stronger. Amen. I'm glad Rukia-san has someone she can share her secrets with. Ishin smirked. Don't forget Captain Ukitake. We have a secret too, so that means our bond is stronger now, right? Jushiro nodded. Amen. Don't worry, I'll keep our talk about Rukia-san a secret as well. Although the probability for Rukia to be specifically requested as the one stationed in Karakura town seems highly unlikely, I'll keep in mind your request. Amen. That's all I could ask for. Captain. Thankfully Captain Ukitake is very accommodating. I've placed one countermeasure against Aizen for myself and want to help foil his plans from trying to steal the Hijoku. If everything goes well, Rukia will no longer be stationed in Karakura town. Then she'll never transfer her powers to Ichigo. Then she'll never have to take in Urahara's Gigai with the hidden Hijoku. Then Aizen won't be able to get his hands on it that way. The question is, if it does go as I planned, how will Aizen counterplan? My plan only saves Rukia from the trouble, but there are so many ways that Aizen can still obtain the Hijoku. I'm sure of it. He must have some redundancy plans in place. Though I have no idea what they could be. TCH. This is like playing chess against someone whose pieces are all queens. He can move them whichever way he wants without much care, while I'm left with only pawns on the board and perhaps the occasional rook or bishop. TCH. Ishin stayed and chatted with Jushiro for another hour or so before he returned to the 3rd division, where he took note of Kira practicing his Zanjutsu on the training grounds. He walked over and greeted, "Yo. Kira-senpai." Kira paused and wiped some sweat off of his forehead as he returned the greeting. "Kishin. You're back. How was your visit with Captain Ukitake?" "Man, it was nice." "And how was Captain Aizen's lecture?" "It was really eye-opening. Captain Aizen is what you'd call a renaissance man, I suppose. He has knowledge in just about every field. His poetry was also quite good." "Alright. You enjoy writing haikus, right, senpai?" Kira grinned and nodded. "Man. Oh, Kishin, if you're ever interested in haikus, then come talk to me. I'm always happy to teach or share." "I'll think about it. Anyways, you're back to training. Did you learn some new Zanjutsu skills after Aizen's lecture?" I suppose you could say that. Captain Aizen gave some pointers to everyone. Not just in Zanjutsu but in all forms of combat. "What do you say, 4th seat, want to try me out?" Ishin smirked. "Interesting. Okay." He stood on the training field opposite of Kira and got in a battle-ready stance. Kira sheathed his sword as he placed his fists in front of him. After a few seconds of observing one another, Kira dashed with great speed right for Kishin. However, Kishin simply grinned as he easily followed Kira's movements. Bam. Boom. Wham. Whoosh. Whish. Whoosh. As Kira attacked in a series of punches and kicks, Kishin easily blocked and parried each strike. As Kira's left fist struck towards his chest, he easily knocked it aside before countering and thrusting a palm strike right under Kira's chin. Wham. Do it. Kira groaned as some saliva flew from his mouth. He was flung through the air several meters away before crashing on the ground. Kishin smirked and commented, "Not bad, senpai. Not bad." Kira slowly got up as he heaved out a heavy breath. Huff. 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 "Not bad, you say? I never knew your skill in Hakuta was this good, Kishin-kun. So, what else did you learn?" "Senpai." Kishin said amusedly. Kira gritted his teeth and shouted, "Hado number 4. By Akurai." Just as the blue lightning was about to strike Kishin, his body blurred into the distance with Shunpo easily evading the attack as he countered by saying, Bakuda number 4. Hinawa. Kira widened his eyes in shock and quickly unsheathed his Zanpakuto, slashing the yellow rope before it could ensnare him. He placed out his palm and shouted, Hado number 31. Shakuho. Kishin countered by placing out his own palm saying, Hado number 32. Akasan. A burst of red flaming energy from Kira's hand clashed against a burst of yellow lightning energy from Kishin's hand, creating a loud noise and large smokescreen to appear between them. Kira immediately followed up by shouting, Hado number 33. Sakatsui. As Kishin watched a pale blue fire arrive before him, he countered by stretching out his palms and said, Bakudo number 39. Enkasan. A yellow spinning energy shield immediately appeared in front of him and negated Kira's attack. It was then Kira had Shunpo'd right behind Kishin and struck with his Zanpakuto, however in the next instant he widened his eyes in shock as he lost sight of Kishin. Not a moment later he felt the cool touch of Kishin's blade against his neck. Man. No wonder you're third seat. Senpai. You're pretty strong. Kira felt a bead of sweat drip down the side of his face. Impossible, your Shunpo is that fast already? Kishin simply retracted his blade and placed it back in its hilt as he began to walk off. Kira senpai. Thanks for letting me win today. Without waiting for a response he disappeared into a building, leaving a completely stunned and baffled Kira. In the shadow of the training ground stood Jin as he watched the entire fight. He's pretty good. He improved so quickly. His Shunpo is on the precipice of becoming as fast as a captain's. His Reiatsu control is lieutenant level despite only being 76 years old. He's only trained as a Shinigami for 6 years. Not bad, not bad. To reach his level of Shunpo most Shinigami need to dedicate at least 20 years of practice. His Kido is also strong. Kira has been a Shinigami for at least 35 years now, yet he lost to Kishin in every skill facet a Shinigami possesses. Zanjutsu, Ho-Ho, Hakuda, Kido. If Tosen wasn't hidden in Area 57 on orders of Aizen and secretly interfered that day, I bet he would have succeeded in killing that experimental Jillian. I was able to get rid of the experimental Jillian before anyone could truly engage it in battle and realized that it was more powerful and stealthy than the standard Jillians of Hueco Mundo. If R&D didn't receive the distress signal that day I probably wouldn't have been forced to go. Aizen wanted to see Kishin fight that Jillian, however he sort of cheated by having Tosen interfere. In the end I couldn't tell what Aizen was thinking. What if Naruto reincarnation bleach harem? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.